Hello everyone, I know you are going to use this video for falling asleep, so before that, like this video, subscribe to the channel and let me know where you are from, also what time is it. No one could remember exactly when the door first appeared. Some said it was always there, just part of the land like the wind that never moved and the trees that leaned but never broke. Others said it showed up overnight, rising out of the dirt in Dallow's field like a splinter from the world's skin. It was just a door, wooden, red, standing upright in the middle of an empty field with no walls, no hinges, no frame. It faced east, toward the sunrise, and never cast a shadow. That was the first thing that made it wrong. The second was that it breathed. At first, people ignored it. It was just another odd thing in a town already heavy with stories. Grenton, population barely 2,000. Where the streetlights flickered on their own, and the forest behind the church had never grown past a certain line. Dallow's field had always been avoided after dark, a patch of land that locals said made cows stillborn and turned weather vanes in the wrong direction. But the door was new, or maybe it wasn't. Either way, people stayed away. Then Tyler Hames disappeared. He was 15, a local troublemaker with a half-shaved head and a penchant for stealing beer from his uncle's garage. His bike was found near the edge of the field, lying on its side, wheel still spinning when a jogger spotted it. No signs of struggle. No prints. Just the door, standing 20 yards away. Tyler's parents thought he ran off. The town didn't argue. Not until Ellen Grady vanished 3 days later. She was 72, nearly blind, and hadn't left her house in weeks. But the front door was wide open, her slippers sitting neatly on the welcome mat. Her keys were found at the edge of Dallow's field, half buried in the soil. Then Todd Langley. Then June Peters. Then Officer Mara Briggs. She went alone. She was the first to actually investigate the door. Drove out there on a Wednesday, armed with a crowbar and flashlight. The patrol car was found idling near the field's fence. The driver's side door was still open. Her gun was left on the seat. Her boots were 30 feet into the field. Heels dug in as if she'd been pulled backward. She never came home. That's when I started paying attention again. Grenton wasn't a place you returned to after leaving. Not unless you were drunk or broken. I was both. Cal had been gone for 13 years, and even though the papers stopped printing his name after the third week, I never stopped remembering the way he stared out the window at night. Like something was calling him. He was 10 when he vanished. My little brother. And the last thing he gave me was a note I never opened. The last time I saw him, he was standing barefoot at the edge of Dallow's field. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair soaked with sweat. He handed me a folded piece of paper and said, "If I don't come back, burn this." Then he walked into the field. I waited all night. He never returned. I didn't burn the note. I buried it under a loose board in the barn and tried to pretend it never happened. Now, 13 years later, I was back. Not because of guilt. Not even because of the door. I came back because of a dream. 3 nights in a row. Same one, exactly. I'd wake up in my old bed, back in the farmhouse, with the sheets stuck to my skin and a sound clawing at the edge of my hearing, scratching faint but steady, like nails against drywall. Then I'd hear Cal's voice, soft and cracked, whispering from under the bed, "Don't let it open. Whatever you do, don't let it open." Then I'd see the door, standing in a field of ash, wide open, and something crawling out on all fours, backwards, its face hidden. And then I'd wake up, heart pounding, drenched in sweat, the words ringing in my ears. I drove through the town just after sunset. Main Street looked gutted. Half the storefronts were empty, and the grocery store had plywood nailed across the windows. I didn't stop, just kept going, past the gas station, past the church, past the old school, where they found Samantha Wynn's teeth, in the janitor's closet after she vanished. I pulled up to the edge of Dallow's field, killed the engine, and sat there for a minute, listening to the silence. There were no crickets, no birds, just windless quiet. The field stretched out like a sheet of rot, brown, withered, ugly. The grass looked scorched, though there hadn't been a fire, and in the middle of it all stood the door. It was taller than I remembered, 7 feet at least, deep red, almost black, with long scratches gouged into its center. Not surface scratches, deep, groove, like claws had raked across it with desperation. No knob, no handle, no frame, just wood. Old and rotting, yet untouched by time. I walked toward it, boots crunching over the brittle grass. The closer I got, the more the air changed. Heavy, thick, like something pressing against my chest. 10 feet away, and I could feel it, the pulse. Faint but steady. The door was breathing. I stopped 3 feet in front of it. The wood had no grain, no texture. It felt wrong. Too smooth in places, rough in others, like it had been stitched together from different trees. Or bones. I reached out and pressed my palm against it. The warmth beneath my hand wasn't natural. It was wet. Not with rain. With heat. Something living. Something waiting. Then I heard it. My name. Nathan. It came from the other side. Whispered, familiar. Cal. I yanked my hand back and stumbled away. The voice stopped. The air thinned. My breath came in ragged bursts. The wind still hadn't moved. I should have run. Should have left it there and gone back to the city. But I didn't. I came back the next morning with a crowbar and a flashlight. Like Officer Briggs did, I wanted answers. Maybe closure. Maybe something else. I stepped into the field just after sunrise. The grass was darker. Not just dead, blackened. Curling inward as if recoiling from something. The door stood tall, its color deeper in the morning light. I circled it once, slowly. There was nothing on the other side. Just the same wood, scratched and stained, like blood had been wiped from it decades ago. I jammed the crowbar into the seam where the door met the air and pushed. Nothing. I pushed harder. The metal slipped. I tried again. The door creaked. Just a little. A breath escaped from behind it, hot, damp, sour, like meat left too long in the sun. My stomach turned. I pressed forward. The crack widened, and then the voices started. Not one, not two, hundreds, wailing, begging, sobbing, all around me, from above, from below, from inside the wood. I dropped the crowbar and stumbled back, eyes fixed on that widening sliver of black. There was no light beyond it, just darkness, alive and shifting. And then I saw them, hands, pale and thin, writhing out from the crack like worms from a corpse. They grasped and reached, desperate to pull something, anything, toward them. One of them wore a ring. Cal's ring. I dropped to my knees, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The hands pulled back. The door slammed shut. The screams stopped. Silence. Thick and awful. I stayed there, frozen in the dirt, until the sun dipped behind the hills. Then I got up, walked back to the truck, and drove straight to the barn. I tore up the floorboard and pulled out Cal's note. The paper was brittle now, yellowed and flaking at the edges. My hands shook as I unfolded it. Only 6 words were written inside. Don't trust the one who knocks. That night, just after midnight, I heard a knock at my front door. 3 slow, deliberate taps. I looked through the peephole. It was Cal. He hadn't aged a day. I didn't open the door. Not at first. I just stood there. I pressed to the peephole, heart knocking against my ribs harder than Cal ever could. He wasn't moving. Just standing on the porch like time forgot him. Same shaggy hair. Same flannel jacket he wore the night he disappeared. His hands hung at his sides, too still, like they'd been placed there. His mouth was curled into a soft smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Those eyes, they weren't right. Cal had green eyes. I remembered that. Green like the moss by the creek we used to play in. These eyes were darker, duller, like stones pulled from a deep well. He tilted his head slowly and said, "Nathan." "It's okay now. You can let me in." I didn't move. My skin prickled with something cold, something ancient. I whispered, "Say something only Cal would know." He smiled wider, but said nothing. A silence bloomed between us. Then he said, "Mom's ring. You buried it behind the chicken coop after she died. You told me never to dig it up." I stepped back. He was right. No one else knew that. My fingers trembled as I reached for the deadbolt. Then I stopped. Something was wrong. The voice. It sounded like Cal, sure, but only the words. Not the rhythm, not the breath behind them. It was like someone mimicking a melody they'd only heard once. He knocked again. 3 soft taps. "Let me in, Nathan. I'm cold." I backed away from the door, shaking my head. No. The smile faded. For a second, his expression went blank. Not sad, not angry, just empty. Then, without blinking, he said, "I'm hungry." I ran. Not out of the house. Not upstairs. I ran to the fireplace and grabbed the old revolver my father used to keep loaded behind the mantel. 6 rounds. Dusty. Cold. Heavy enough to make my arm ache. I crept back toward the door. Nothing. I looked again. The porch was empty. No Cal. No footprints. Just the wind, moving again for the first time in hours. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the hallway with the revolver across my lap, eyes locked on the door, waiting for the next knock. But it never came. At dawn, I checked the porch. Nothing. No tracks in the dirt. No prints on the doorknob. Like it never happened. I almost convinced myself it was a dream, until I saw what had been left behind. On the welcome mat sat a ring, Mom's, covered in mud. I didn't touch it. I scooped it into a jar with a pair of tongs and sealed it shut. That was the first sign. The second came 2 nights later. It started with a hum, faint, low, like a hymn half remembered. It drifted up through the floorboards, through the vents, through my skull. I pressed my hands to my ears, but it was still there, vibrating through my bones. Then came the smell. Wet soil copper. Smoke. I followed it to the attic. The door was open. I never opened that door. Not since the day Cal went missing. The attic was where he used to draw. Pages and pages of that door in the field. I'd found them after he vanished. Hundreds of sketches, all the same. Some showed it cracked open. Some had things crawling through. One had dozens of black figures kneeling before it, their faces eaten by shadows. I stepped inside, flashlight shaking in my hand. The air was thick, heavy with the stench of damp wood and rot. My boots creaked against the old boards. Something scratched above me. I aimed the light upward. There was nothing, just beams and cobwebs. Then the light caught something on the wall, new drawings. Fresh ones, they hadn't been there before. Each page showed the same scene, my house, my living room, my bed, me sleeping. From above, the last drawing was blank except for one sentence, scrawled in jagged letters across the middle. Etched inside an OW. I spun around, gun raised, heart thundering. The attic was empty. I backed out, slammed the door shut, and nailed it closed with 6-inch spikes. I slept in the truck that night, with the gun under my pillow and the engine running. By morning, the radio was dead. My phone, too. I tried to call someone, anyone, but every number rang back to my own voicemail. Even 911, same thing. Just my voice, recorded years ago. "Hey, it's Nathan. Leave a message." No matter what number I dialed, I tried to leave town. Tried to take the old highway north. I drove for 40 minutes before I realized the signs were repeating. The gas station on Mill Creek. The old diner with the missing E in Biureke Festi. The same dead raccoon on the shoulder. I passed them all 3 times. When I turned back, I ended up back in front of Dallows Field. And the door was closer, not in the middle anymore. It had moved. Now it stood just 20 feet from the fence, waiting. That night, I gave up pretending. I went into the barn, pulled out Cal's drawings, and spread them across the table. I needed to understand. Not to fix anything, not to save anyone. Just to know what I was dealing with. The earliest sketches were shaky, childish. The later ones were terrifying. One in particular caught my eye. It showed a man, standing in front of the door, with dozens of tiny black shapes crawling out from behind it, swarming up his legs. He wasn't screaming. He was smiling, just like Cal. And in the bottom corner, in Cal's tight handwriting, were the words, "You have to feed it." I didn't sleep. I waited. The knocking came at 3:07 a.m., 3 taps, then silence, then a fourth. I looked through the peephole. It wasn't Cal this time. It was a woman, naked, soaked from head to toe. Her hair was matted over her face. She stood crookedly, like her spine had forgotten how to hold her upright. She raised her hand and pointed at the door, then at me, then back at the door, and whispered, "He's still hungry." The next morning, I packed everything I could, drove to the church. Father Allen was still there. He hadn't aged a day either. When I told him about the door, he didn't flinch. He just said, "I warned them not to bury it. You can't bury something that was never alive." Then he handed me a book, leather-bound, locked. He told me not to open it until I was ready. When I asked what was inside, he said, "A name, and a way to make it stop." I took it home. I haven't opened it yet. Not because I'm not ready, but because I think it's already too late. The door is on my lawn now, and last night, there were knock marks on my bedroom wall. I counted the knocks. 1, 2, 3, 4, then silence. Then breathing, not mine, not outside the house, inside the wall behind my headboard. It was soft at first, just a hiss through plaster, wet and steady, like lungs coated in something thick. Then came the scratching, gentle, repetitive, like fingernails dragging slowly across drywall. I froze, body stiff beneath the blankets, every muscle wound tight. The revolver lay under the pillow beside me. I didn't move for it. Not yet. I just listened. The sound continued for 7 minutes, then stopped. I waited, counted to 60 in my head. Twice. Nothing. Slowly, I reached for the revolver and slid out of bed. The floor creaked beneath my weight, but the silence held. I padded to the wall and pressed my ear to it. My skin met cold. Then, tap, tap, tap from the other side. Not knuckles. Nails. I staggered back, heart rattling my chest. That wall backed up to nothing but a narrow hallway and the linen closet. There shouldn't be space in there for someone to move, let alone scratch. I flicked on the hall light, walked slowly toward the closet. The air grew colder with every step. I opened the door. Towels, shelves, bleach, nothing else. No hidden doors, no crawl space. I leaned in, staring at the back wall. The faintest smear ran down it, dark, oily, almost invisible unless you were close. I touched it. It pulsed. I yanked my hand back. The pulse remained under my skin. A slow, rhythmic throb that didn't belong to me. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Instead, I sat in the living room, surrounded by Cal's drawings, the revolver in my lap, and the locked book from Father Allen resting on the coffee table. It was small, worn smooth, and smelled like a basement. I turned it over in my hands a dozen times before finally snapping the lock with a screwdriver. Inside, the pages weren't written. They were carved. Letters cut deep into the paper as if written by someone desperate not to forget. The first page held one word. Virnd. Ich. The name tasted foul in my mouth the second I whispered it aloud. The lights flickered. The house groaned. Something shifted in the walls. The next page had a diagram. A drawing of the door, red, scarred, standing in a circle of black symbols I didn't recognize. Around the base were stick figures, small and hunched, offering things to it. Birds, bones, children. The next line said, "It does not open. It chooses." I flipped through page after page, warnings, sketches, rituals, maps. But one passage stood out. It had been underlined, carved so deeply the paper had nearly split. The one who knocks wears a friendly face. Do not speak with it. Do not answer. Burn the body, not the door. My blood ran cold. Burn the body. I looked up at Cal's drawings. All those hands. All those eyes. Faces smiling in the dark. And then I remembered something. The day Cal disappeared, We found dead birds outside our door. 3 of them lined up in a row, beaks pointing at the house. Mom said it was a warning. Dad said it was cats. They argued about it for hours. But that night, Cal disappeared. I turned to the last page. It was a list. 13 names. Cal's was the 7th. Mine was the 12th. The 13th was blank. I slammed the book shut. The room felt smaller, like the walls were closer. I needed to breathe. I opened the front door. The door, the red one, was 20 feet from my porch now. It had moved again. No tracks. No trail. Just closer. I stepped outside, revolver in hand, and walked toward it. Each step felt heavier than the last. My ears buzzed. The sky above was wrong, too still. No clouds, no stars. Just black. The door loomed. I circled it. Same claw marks, same deep red paint. But something was different. The wood was wet. Sticky. It left stains on the ground where it stood. I crouched. Beneath it, something moved. A shadow. I reached for it, and the door breathed. The sound made my stomach twist. Not like lungs, like hunger. That's when I heard a voice behind me. Low. Familiar. Hey, Nathan. I turned. It was my father. Dead 5 years. Standing 10 feet away. He smiled, eyes glassy. You never found me, he said. He stepped forward. His arms dangled at his sides like marionette strings cut too short. I waited in the dark. I waited behind the wall. I raised the revolver. You're not real. He smiled wider. I'm not your father, but I remember how he screamed. He opened his mouth. Too wide. Far too wide. A second voice spoke from inside it. Cal's voice. Nathan, help me. I fired. The body dropped. When I looked again, it wasn't my father. It wasn't anyone. Just an empty skin. Folded on the ground like a costume. The door pulsed again, and whispered, one more. I ran. Back into the house, slamming the door, barricading it. I was shaking, sweating. But the worst came an hour later, when the phone rang. No one had called me in days. The screen lit up with one word. Cal. I didn't answer. The voicemail icon flashed. I pressed play. His voice, crystal clear. Hey, it's me. I'm so close. You almost got it open, Nate. Just a little more. Let me in. I promise it won't hurt. Not you. Then silence. Then breathing. Then. He knows your name now. I dropped the phone, stepped back and saw the hallway wall was bleeding. The bleeding wall didn't drip like paint or trail like water. It moved upward, against gravity. A long, black smear crawling toward the ceiling like a slug dragging tar in its wake. I didn't get close. I just stood there, staring, revolver trembling in my grip as the thing in the wall writhed without sound, as if the house itself had started to bleed from the inside out. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the smear stopped, hardened, dried instantly into a long crack, jagged and splitting the plaster like something had tried to crawl out, but changed its mind halfway through. I stood frozen for a long time after that, just listening. Every creak in the floor felt deliberate. Every distant moan of the house's frame sounded like a breath. I should have left. I should have burned the place like the book said. But I wasn't ready. Not until I knew where Cal was, or what was left of him. The knock the night before hadn't been him. I knew that now. But that voice on the voicemail, that was Cal. I knew it in my bones. The door outside hadn't moved from the lawn. Not yet. But that would change. I spent the next few hours tearing the house apart. Floorboards, crawl spaces, closets I hadn't opened in years. Anything that might have led to some hidden room. Some space the thing in the wall could have come from. I ended up in the basement. Bare bulb swinging, chains on the old meat, hook rattling from a draft I couldn't place. It smelled worse than I remembered, damp and coppery like old pennies soaked in mildew. That's when I saw the bricks. One wall of the basement had always been strange. Half-painted, sloppy, covered with a dusty workbench I never moved. But now, as I swept the dust and cobwebs away, I saw it, the seams. A bricked-off section, perfect square, maybe 6 feet tall, newer mortar. Slightly darker, Someone had sealed off a room behind it. I didn't remember it being there before, and I grew up in this house. I grabbed a sledgehammer from the barn, came back, and swung. The first blow sent a hollow ring through the basement. The second cracked the center. The third broke it. Bricks fell like teeth. The smell hit me harder this time, fall, thick, alive. I covered my mouth, eyes watering, and knocked the rest free until I could squeeze through. It wasn't a room. It was a hallway. Stone walls, wet and narrow, extending far beyond what should have been the edge of the house. I should have stopped. Gone back up. Called someone, even if every number still led to myself. But I didn't. I stepped inside. The moment I crossed the threshold, sound left me. Not like silence, worse. Like being buried in cotton. My footsteps didn't echo. My breath made no noise. Even my heartbeat felt dulled. I moved forward slowly, flashlight cutting through the darkness. The walls were moist, pulsing slightly with each step. As if I were walking through the inside of something not quite dead. That's when I saw the scratches. Not on the walls, on the floor. Deep grooves, like someone had been dragged backward, hands clawing the stone, fingernails shattered into dust. Then the whispers returned, but not from ahead, from behind. I turned. Nobody. But I felt breath on my neck. I moved faster. 10 feet more and the hallway opened into a small chamber, circular, dome ceiling, and in the middle, a chair. Wood. Old, facing the wall. Someone sat in it. I raised the flashlight. My throat clenched. It was Cal. Or something wearing his shape. His back was to me. Head tilted. Shoulders shaking like he was crying. I stepped forward slow. Cal! The body tensed, but didn't turn. Kyle, it's me. Nathan. Then, he laughed. High, pitched, broken, like glass grinding in a child's mouth. I tried, he whispered. I kept trying. But the door never stays closed. He turned his head slightly. Just enough for me to see his eye. It was gone. An empty socket stared back at me, black and pulsing like the wall. You saw it, didn't you? He croaked. It wears faces. Yours, mine, hers. I stepped forward, tears stinging my vision. What is it? He smiled, teeth like needles. It feeds on names, on memory, on fear. Then he stood, and the thing inside him woke up. His body jerked forward like a puppet cut from its strings. His limbs cracked unnaturally. Bones shifted under skin like worms crawling beneath thin ice. His jaw unhinged, and something else spoke through him. We are not the first, it said, and you will not be the last. I raised the revolver. Give him back. The thing laughed again. Low, echoing off the damp walls in impossible directions. There is no back, Nathan. Only through. It lunged. I fired. The shot lit the room in a blinding flash. The body dropped, but it didn't bleed. It leaked. Thick. Black ichor poured from the corpse, spreading across the floor like oil. It hissed as it touched the stone, burning into it. I backed away, coughing, retching. Stumbling out of the chamber and back into the tunnel. The whispers chased me the entire way. Some laughed. Some screamed. One just repeated my name over and over in Cal's voice. I crawled back through the hole into the basement and sealed it with salt, nails, and a blowtorch. It wasn't enough. When I looked outside that night, the red door was gone from the lawn. Now it's in the hallway, and the knock is coming from inside the bathroom. Let me know when you're ready for part 5. You said next. In paragraph style, please 2p2. ChatGPT said part 5 nichishpsers iane tibetrom. I didn't want to move. Not toward the door. Not anywhere. The knock had come from inside the bathroom. The smallest room in the house. Barely big enough for a toilet and a sink. I stared at the hallway for minutes, frozen in the living room doorway with the revolver heavy in my hand, heart hammering loud enough to drown out thought. The bathroom light was off. The crack beneath the door glowed faintly. Not with light, but with something else, like the faint reflection of moonlight on still water, but wrong, rippling inward instead of out. The handle twitched once, then silence. I stepped forward slowly, feet whispering over the hardwood. The air grew colder with each step, heavy with the scent of mildew, old rust, and something sweet like rotting fruit. My breath fogged. When I reached the bathroom door, I pressed my ear against the wood. Nothing at first. Then came a whisper, low and smooth, almost soothing if it hadn't felt like it slid directly into my mind. Nathan. I found a way through. It's better here. No pain. No memory. Just open it. I stepped back. The voice wasn't Cal's. Not anymore. It wore his tone, borrowed his rhythm, but it was hollow, emptied and filled with something colder, something that had forgotten how to sound human. I pointed the revolver at the door and waited. 5 minutes. 10. I didn't move. I couldn't. Then the handle turned slowly. The door creaked open a few inches, the faint ripple of unnatural light flickering along the edge. I saw nothing inside. Just a stretch of black, deeper than shadow, like a hole in the world's surface. And then a hand slid out, not reaching, not clawing, just resting gently on the floor. It was pale, skin stretched thin over long bones. But what made my stomach knot was that the fingernails were painted sky blue. Mom's favorite color. I had painted her nails that color the day she was buried. I took a step back. The hand twitched and curled its fingers in a come, hither gesture. Please, the voice said again, softer this time, more pleading. I don't want to be alone anymore. I slammed the door shut and bolted it from the outside, dragging a bookshelf in front of it for good measure. The moment it clicked, the house exhaled a low, wet groan from the pipes, like the walls were breathing with relief or frustration. I didn't wait to see which. I returned to the living room, grabbed the locked book, and tore through its pages again. The passage I'd overlooked before was there, carved into the margin beside the ritual diagram. If it crosses your threshold uninvited, the house becomes its mouth. I didn't sleep that night. Every so often, the bathroom door handle rattled gently, like someone trying to be polite. Once, I heard the sound of water running, though the pipes had been shut off for months. Then humming, a lullaby I hadn't heard since I was 8 years old. Mom's voice, perfect pitch, perfect timing. By dawn, the door was silent again, but the mirror in the hallway was broken. Cracks split through the center like spider webs, and in the middle, drawn with a finger, was a message smeared in condensation, Lee. I went outside to catch my breath, the weight of the house pressing against my back. The field was no longer just beyond the hill. It was everywhere now. The cornfields, the woods. All of it had turned black and still, and the red door, it had returned, standing at the edge of the property. Closer. Each day, closer. It no longer waited to be found. It was coming. I tried to call Father Allen again, but his number had vanished from my contacts, and the church was boarded shut when I drove into town. Every window covered. The parking lot empty. A note pinned to the front door read, "Gone before the 13th knock. Pray you are not home." I returned to the house before sundown, bolted every door, and sat on the porch with a thermos of coffee and the revolver beside me. I watched the red door. It didn't move. Not visibly. But somehow by dusk, it was at the foot of my porch steps. At 10:13 p.m., the first knock came. Not on the front door, from the inside wall of the basement. One knock, deep and slow, like a fist against a tomb, then the second, then the third. I ran back inside and opened the book again, flipping to the final diagram. There was a crude map, a house, surrounded by sigils etched in ash and salt, candles placed at every corner, and a figure drawn in the attic, circled twice. Beneath it read, "You must bind your name to the last place you felt safe. Then it cannot wear your face." I didn't understand it. Not fully. But I knew where I had to go. I climbed to the attic, each step screaming under my weight. The boards were soft, warped, smelled like old blood. I reached the top and saw the new drawings, more of them, hung by invisible hands. This time, they weren't just of the red door. They were of me, sleeping. standing, screaming. One showed me in the attic, looking directly at the viewer with eyes gone solid black. In the far corner was a child's cot. Kyle's old cot, dust, covered in small, with his name etched into the wooden frame in block letters. I knelt beside it, placed my hand on the name, and whispered my own. Nathaniel Warren. I am not yours. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out the locket Mom gave me before she died. I placed it under the mattress, then sat cross-legged on the floor. The house shivered. Below, I heard the basement door burst open. Footsteps, heavy, wet, crawling up the stairs, not walking but climbing like an animal. I whispered my name again. Then the lights went out. Pitch black silence fell. The thing stopped at the attic door. Then it laughed. Low, rattling, close. You think you still belong to this world? It asked through the wood. I didn't answer. The handle twisted, but the door didn't open. It couldn't. Not yet, because I'd bound myself to the last place I was whole. The locket burned cold under the cot. Then came the whisper. Cal's real voice this time. Not twisted, not hollow. I'm still inside, Nate. Don't let it take my name. And just like that, it was gone. No footsteps. No breath. Just the attic, still and stale. But the red door wasn't outside anymore. It was in the kitchen, and it was open 2 inches. I stared at the kitchen from the top of the attic stairs, refusing to blink. The red door stood where the fridge used to be, rising straight from the tile like it had grown there overnight. The walls around it had cracked and warped, counters curling away from its edges, wood floorboards bending upward like the house itself was recoiling. It was open, just 2 inches, but that was enough. A cold draft slithered out from the gap, thick with the scent of iron, mold, and burnt paper. The same dark light I'd seen in the bathroom flickered faintly from within. Not light, exactly. More like a reflection that had nothing to reflect. I wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at me to lock myself in the attic, hammer planks across the hatch, and wait until daylight. But daylight didn't help anymore. The rules had changed. The house wasn't mine now. It had become something else. A vessel, a mouth, just like the book had said. And if I didn't do something soon, I wouldn't just lose my home. I'd lose myself. I stepped slowly down the stairs, the revolver clenched in my hand and Cal's drawings tucked into my coat pocket. With every step toward the kitchen, the air thickened. It felt like walking underwater, each breath a struggle, each heartbeat echoing too loud. The closer I got to the door, the more the walls bled. Fine cracks veined outward from its frame, seeping black ichor that hissed as it met the floor. It smelled of rot and something ancient, like a forgotten tomb. I circled the room, staying close to the cabinets, my eyes locked on that thin crack of darkness between the door and its frame. Inside, something moved, slow, deliberate, dragging itself across unseen ground. A whisper followed it, so low it barely existed. You opened it, just enough. I raised the revolver and aimed for the gap. The wood groaned, as though shifting under pressure. Then I saw the fingers, pale, long with too many knuckles, curling around the edge. They didn't grasp or scratch. They tapped gently, like someone knocking with affection. 3 slow taps. Then a voice, unmistakable this time. Cal's. Don't look at it, Nate. Whatever you do, don't look inside. I shut my eyes, turned away, but the darkness on the other side was a magnet. It pulled at my mind, whispered promises in a voice stitched together from memories and grief. It offered peace, truth, an end to pain. I took a deep breath, turned my back on the door, and walked to the hallway. Behind me, the tapping grew faster, louder, more frantic. Then a sharp crack split the air like a whip, wood breaking, hinges snapping even though there were no hinges at all. The door opened another inch. I ran to the basement. That was the only place it hadn't reached yet. At least, I hoped. The salt line I'd poured across the stairs still glowed faintly, humming with warmth. I stepped over it and slammed the basement door shut behind me. The darkness below was thick, but not alive like the rest of the house. It was quiet, still, the only place left that felt untouched. I lit a candle and sat on the cold concrete floor, flipping through Cal's sketches under the flickering flame. One caught my eye, a new one. I hadn't seen it before. It showed the house, my house, but transformed, twisted. Roots growing from the foundation. Windows like eyes, the red door pulsing in the center like a beating heart. And from the attic, a shape rose. A figure made of light and bone. Dragging chains behind it, its face hidden beneath a shroud. In the corner of the page, Cal had written one line. Burn the name or wear the face. I didn't understand it, not fully. But the book had mentioned something similar. Binding, memory, names. That was the key. This thing, whatever it was, needed identity to latch onto. Names gave it shape. Faces gave it passage. If I burned mine, I'd be nothing to it. No doorway, no path. But it wasn't that simple, because Cal's name was still intact. Somewhere in this house, it still had him. I made my decision. I would go back upstairs. Not to fight, to finish what he started. The kitchen was worse when I returned. The door had opened halfway now, revealing more of the black beyond. No walls, no floor, just depth, moving, breathing. The hand was gone, but something bigger had taken its place. A silhouette, faint and rippling, pressed against the opening like it was trapped behind a sheet of water. It mimicked my movements, tilted when I tilted, raised its hand when I raised mine. Then it smiled. My face. It had my face. I turned away, sprinted to the attic, and tore open the floorboards under Cal's cot. There, buried beneath the mattress, was a bundle of old clothes, drawings, and a metal box. Inside the box was a birth certificate. Cal's, a photo of us by the creek, a pair of shoelaces he used to wear as bracelets. I poured kerosene from the emergency lamp over the contents, lit a match, and whispered his name one last time. Caleb Warren. The fire caught fast. The attic filled with smoke and the scent of burning paper. Then the screaming started. Not from outside, from inside the walls. The thing in the kitchen howled. A sound so sharp it cut through the floorboards, rattled the windows, split my vision with white heat. It shrieked as the fire grew, as Cal's name turned to ash, as the house trembled under the weight of its own possession. Then silence. The red door vanished. Just like that. Gone. The kitchen was empty. The mirror in the hallway shattered. The basement wall sealed itself. And Cal's voice whispered one last time, soft, free, tired, thank you. I collapsed in the attic, coughing, crying, revolver still in hand. When I woke up the next morning, the sun was shining for the first time in days. The house was quiet, whole. But something's still wrong. Because when I looked in the mirror, it didn't blink when I did. I didn't move for nearly a minute. I just stood there, locked in place, staring into the hallway mirror. My breath fogged the glass, but the reflection didn't match. Not exactly. My face was there, my shoulders, my expression of exhaustion and confusion. But something was off. Something you couldn't name until it was too late, a fraction of a second too slow. An eye that didn't twitch when the other did. A tilt of the head that started just after the real one. Like watching yourself on delay. Like being haunted by your own skin. I waved. The reflection didn't. It smiled instead. Not wide, not obvious. Just a small twitch at the corners of its mouth, enough to freeze my blood. I stepped backward. My reflection stayed put. The smile faded slowly, then it blinked. Once. Deliberately. I ran to the kitchen, yanked the drawer open, and grabbed the hammer. When I returned to the mirror, it was normal. Just me again. Breathing hard. Sweating. Shaking. But I wasn't convinced. I brought the hammer up and smashed the glass into splinters. Tiny shards rained down across the hallway floor, catching the morning light like bits of broken ice. My own face fragmented into a dozen warped images, each one watching me from a different angle. Some looked scared. others angry. One of them, near the bottom left corner, smiled again before the crack reached it and split it into dust. I cleaned it all up, every piece. Threw the shards into a garbage bag and dumped it out back. I didn't care if it left me without a mirror in the house. Better that than giving it another window. That's what the red door had been, after all. Not a doorway, a window. Cracked just wide enough to let something inside. It mimicked. It imitated. It offered comfort in familiar faces. I couldn't risk seeing mine again and not knowing if it was really mine. But destroying the mirror didn't stop it. That night I saw my reflection again, in the kitchen window. It was dark outside, and I was doing dishes just to keep my hands moving, trying to distract myself from the silence that had settled over the house like dust. Then I glanced up at the window. It was too dark to see outside. Should have just been black glass, a faint reflection of the kitchen behind me. But what I saw was me standing still while I moved. Its hands weren't in the sink. Its head was tilted. It had that same faint smile. I backed away slowly, dripping soap and water onto the floor, and it stayed there, watching, not blinking. It didn't follow when I left the room. It just watched until the frame slipped from view. The next morning, the locket was gone. The one I'd placed under Cal's cot. The anchor, the tether, the last thing tying my memory to something real. I tore the attic apart searching for it. Nothing. Not even the scorch marks from the fire. Just ashes and splinters and that bitter, heavy smell of something once buried being disturbed again. That afternoon, I drove into town. I needed help. Or answers. Or at least someone who could look me in the eyes and tell me I hadn't completely lost my grip on reality. I went to the only place left that hadn't boarded its windows or hung crosses over the door frames. The library. It was mostly empty. A kid in a hoodie asleep in one of the chairs, and an old woman behind the desk who didn't even glance up as I walked in. I headed straight to the back, to the archives. Old newspaper clippings. Historical records. Microfilm that smelled like vinegar and mold. I needed to know more about the door, the field. Anything. I found something in a clipping from 1894. A headline barely legible from the smudged ink. Warren family perishes in fire. Only one child found. It was my last name. Same house. Same land. Different time. The article talked about a door that appeared in a field outside Grenton, one no one could explain. There were reports of missing livestock. Strange voices in the woods. Then the fire. Everyone inside burned, except a child who was found in the barn, staring at the sunrise. His name wasn't listed. Just his age, 10 years old. I flipped to the next article in the archive. It was from 1932. Different family. Same story. A door, a child, a fire. Over and over across decades, a pattern. Always the same town, always the same outcome. I took photos of the articles and left, my mind reeling. When I got back to the house, the front door was open. Not wide. Just an inch. Exactly like the red door had been. The salt line on the porch was gone. Blown away, disturbed, or maybe consumed. I raised my revolver and stepped inside slowly. Nothing looked disturbed at first. No overturned furniture. No blood. No tracks. Then I heard the television. Static. Loud, violent, hissing static coming from the living room. I hadn't turned the TV on in days. Maybe weeks. I approached slowly. Each step ringing in my ears, the volume growing louder until it was almost unbearable. When I rounded the corner, the screen was glowing bright white. The couch was empty. Then the static stopped. A voice cut through. "Welcome home, Nathan." My knees buckled. I dropped to the floor, hands shaking, bile rising in my throat. The screen flickered once. Then it showed my house. Live footage. A camera feed from somewhere high. Maybe the attic, maybe the ceiling. The angle was impossible. I was there on the screen, on my knees, watching myself. But the version on the screen began to smile. Slow. Wide. Too wide. Then the voice came again. "Let me finish what you started." I pulled the cord from the wall. The screen died. But the voice didn't. It echoed from inside the walls, behind the fireplace, from under the floorboards, inside my head. I've worn your face before. I ran to the bathroom not to hide, but to check. The mirror was gone. Yes, but the glass of the medicine cabinet was still intact. I looked, and there it was again. My reflection. Smiling. And this time, it mouthed something I didn't hear. But I understood it perfectly. One more knock. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sit. I didn't eat. I paced the house with the revolver in one hand and the crumpled library clippings in the other, reading and reading the words until they blurred into each other like oil on water. The pattern was undeniable. Every few decades, a door appears, someone opens it, and the entire family is swallowed, burned, erased. Only a child remains each time. I tried to convince myself it couldn't be connected to me, couldn't be my family. But the land matched. The stories matched. The name matched. And deep down I knew. I wasn't the first. I wasn't even the second. I was part of something older. Something that didn't just haunt bloodlines, it fed on them. By sunrise, the air in the house felt different. Thin. Filtered. Like breathing through cloth. My shadow didn't move with me anymore. It hesitated behind my steps, delayed by a half-second, mimicking but never quite matching. The hallway was longer than it had been. I walked it 3 times and counted one more door than there should have been. When I turned to check again, the extra door was gone. Or maybe I was the one who'd slipped. I returned to the attic. I needed to see Cal's drawings again. I'd burned most of them during the ritual, but a few had been saved. Tucked into the corners, slipped beneath loose boards. I found one folded behind a rafter. It was a face. At least, I think it was. The features were smeared and stretched, eyes drawn as empty ovals, and a mouth that went down instead of across, like a wound that had never closed. Around it were names. Dozens, scribbled in frantic loops and spirals. All first names, no surnames. None repeated. All of them crossed out except one. Mine. No line through it. Just 6 letters, circled in red natun. Below it, Cal had written something so faint it was nearly illegible. Hell take the name before the face. I didn't understand at first. Then I remembered what the book said. About names. About how they weren't just identifiers. They were doors. Permissions. If the thing had your name, it didn't need your skin. It could walk in without knocking. I sat on the attic floor and whispered my full name aloud. It sounded wrong in my mouth. Like it didn't belong to me anymore. Like I'd already given it away. I looked around the attic, and for the first time, the air shimmered. Heatless. Shifting. Like the walls were breathing again. Then I saw movement by the cot, slow, deliberate. A shadow that pulled itself out from beneath it. I raised the revolver, but the shape didn't charge. It just stood. Then it stepped into the light. It looked like Cal, but it wasn't. The eyes were blank, white, not rolled back but emptied, hollow as peeled eggshells. Its mouth hung slightly open, revealing rows of small, flat teeth. Human teeth, but too many. Too neat. It reached out and tapped its chest with one finger. "You gave it to me," it said in a voice that vibrated wrong. "Now I can speak as you." I fired once. The bullet passed through. It didn't flinch, just kept smiling. "I wear your echo," it said, "but I want your name." Then it vanished. No scream, no flourish, just folded backward into the air like paper in a flame. I packed what I could. I was going to leave. I didn't care if the road twisted back. I didn't care if the world outside turned to ash. I couldn't stay. The house was no longer mine. My name was no longer mine. But when I opened the front door, the world was gone. No trees, no sky, just red fog. The porch stretched into nothing, suspended over an abyss that pulsed like the skin of a drum. And standing at the edge, just beyond the steps, was a figure, back to me. Head bowed, it was me, same coat, same shoes. Even the same scar on the neck from when I fell through the fence at 13. It turned slowly. and it grinned. Its eyes were empty, its mouth too wide. But its voice was perfect. Nathan. I slammed the door shut. The walls groaned. The kitchen light exploded above me, raining glass. I fell back against the wall, heartbeat pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. Then came the footsteps from the second floor. Slow, measured, like someone descending not for speed, but for effect. I didn't need to look. I already knew. It was wearing my face again. I bolted the front door, turned every lock, shoved the couch against it. Then I ran for the basement. If I couldn't run, I could hide. If I couldn't hide, I could bury it again. That's what the book said. Burn the name, bury the face. In the basement, I lit every candle I had, circled myself in salt, clutched the revolver until my knuckles went white. The sound of footsteps stopped at the top of the basement stairs. Then it spoke. I remember the creak. Nathan. My breath caught. The way the frog sounded. The cold mud. The little jar you used to keep snails in. You don't think I was really Cal, do you? I didn't answer. It laughed softly. I was just what was left of him, what he gave up to keep the door closed. But you opened it again. You called me. The door at the top of the basement creaked open slowly. I raised the revolver. I'm not afraid of you. I lied. The voice came again, lower now, closer. You should be. I'm not the only one wearing your skin. And then I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't turn around right away. Every part of me wanted to, but I knew better. That thing had worn too many faces already, and if it was behind me now, wearing mine, I couldn't let it see my fear. Not again. I kept the revolver steady, aimed at the stairs. Eyes locked on the flickering shadows above. The candlelight quivered against the damp concrete walls, stretching and shrinking like it was breathing with me. The footsteps behind me weren't rushed. They were soft, barefoot, one after the other, a gentle rhythm that grew louder even though they weren't hurrying. I clenched my jaw, heart thudding hard enough to hurt. You left the door open, Nathan. The voice said from behind me, not just mimicking but possessing my tone, my exact inflection, every quirk of my speech. It was eerie how perfect it was. You can't close it now. Not without paying for what came through. Still, I didn't move. If I shoot and miss, I said slowly, I'll just reload and try again. Silence. Then laughter, low and cold. Oh, but that's not the game anymore, it said. You opened the red door, and now the house has more than one of you. I spun around, fast and sudden, bringing the gun with me. There was no one there. Just the basement. Empty. But something had changed. The far wall was bleeding again, black rivulets seeping through cracks that hadn't been there moments before. The salt circle was no longer glowing. It had gone flat, dull, powerless. Whatever barrier I'd tried to create had faded with the illusion of safety. I backed toward the center of the room and scanned every corner. My breath came in shallow bursts, fogging the air. Then a voice from the shadows said, "Why do you think the others didn't survive?" A figure stepped out. Not me this time. Not Cal. It was a woman, naked, pale, with eyes that had no whites, just black from edge to edge, like pits bored into her skull. Her arms dangled at her sides, too long, hands dragging behind her like the limbs of a broken doll. Her mouth hung open, and from within it, dozens of small voices whispered over each other like a have. Open. Let us in. Let us in. Let us in. I raised the gun and fired. The shot cracked through the basement and lit her for a second in the burst. The bullet tore through her shoulder, but she didn't flinch. She didn't even bleed. Just swayed once, like wind brushing through tall grass, then began walking toward me again. Her footsteps made no sound. Her mouth still hung open. Voices pouring out faster now, louder some high, pitched like children, others guttural like beasts. Your face. Your name. Your home. We remember you. You forgot us. I stepped back until I hit the cold wall behind me. Nowhere else to go. I raised the gun again, aimed for her head this time. But before I could pull the trigger, the basement floor shook. A low rumble. The concrete beneath her feet cracked in a perfect circle. She stopped walking, tilted her head, and then slowly began to sink, feet first, into the breaking floor like she was being pulled downward by invisible hands. As she sank, her face changed. Skin peeled back, eyes twisted, mouth stretched until the entire lower half of her jaw unhinged and fell open like a sack of wet stones. From within her mouth, dozens of hands reached upward, clawing at the air, at the ceiling, at me. I fired again. The bullet hit one of the hands and vanished into the dark. The light went out. Total black. No shadows. No sound. Nothing. I stood frozen. Revolver outstretched, breath coming in gasps, my other hand fumbling along the wall until it landed on the emergency lantern I kept near the stairs. I clicked it on. The basement was empty again. Clean. No blood. No cracks. The salt circle glowed faintly once more, as if whatever came through had passed and left no trace. Except one. On the wall, just above the cot where I'd spent the night after Cal vanished, something was written in dried brown streaks. Not red like blood. Brown. Old. Aged. As if it had been there for years, waiting to be revealed. He walks ahead of his echo. I didn't know what it meant. Not then. But it felt like a warning. I left the basement and locked the door behind me with 3 chains and a wooden cross. It wouldn't help. Not really. But rituals gave shape to fear. They gave you something to hold while the walls collapsed around you. Upstairs, I noticed something even worse. My photographs were changing. All the pictures, on shelves, in frames, inside dusty albums, had the same face now. Mine. Everyone had my face. Grandparents, parents, neighbors, even Cal. But the expressions were wrong. They smiled with their teeth too wide. And in one of them, the version of me in the background was looking away from the camera, staring at something out of frame. I burned them all. But when I came back into the room, they were back on the wall, unburned, undamaged exactly where they'd always been. And I was in every single one. Only this time, I wasn't smiling. That night, I locked myself in the attic again, pushed a bookshelf across the hatch, loaded every round I had into the revolver, and spread the remaining salt across every edge of the floor. Then I sat, back against the wall, and waited for whatever came next. It didn't take long. Somewhere beneath the floorboards, the walls began to whisper. Voices. Dozens. One of them was mine, calling up from the dark. "I'm still in the basement," it said. "You locked the wrong one out." The attic walls pulsed with breath again. Not air, not wind, but something thick and wet exhaling through old wood. I sat with my knees pulled to my chest, revolver balanced across my thighs, eyes fixed on the hatch below. The bookshelf I dragged across it was beginning to creak. Slowly, in rhythm, like something beneath it was pushing gently, politely, knocking just once every few minutes to remind me it hadn't gone anywhere. And the worst part was, it didn't feel threatening. It felt patient. As if it knew it didn't need to force its way in. It was just waiting for me to make a mistake. "I'm still in the basement," the voice had said, and it had been mine. Not an imitation. Not distorted. Mine, tone perfect, breath for breath. The way my throat caught when I spoke certain words. The slight rasp I had when I was tired. It hadn't just borrowed my sound. It had taken something deeper. Something rooted in my bones. That's when I remembered what the book had warned. When you hear yourself calling, don't answer. If your echo speaks before you do, it owns the silence. It owned more than that now. The photos, the mirror, the window reflections. They weren't trips. They were steps. Preparations. Little rehearsals for what came next. If it could be me in all those spaces, it was only a matter of time before someone else saw it and thought it was me. And then I'd vanish. Not dead, not missing. Replaced. The candlelight flickered. The shadows shifted. A soft creak sounded from the far corner of the attic, the one behind the cot where Cal used to sleep. I didn't turn my head. I didn't breathe. Just kept staring at the hatch, waiting. Then it spoke again. "I'm scared," it said, but not in my voice, in Cal's. "You shouldn't have burned my name, Nathan. You made it hungry." I stood slowly, the revolver shaking in my grip. The voice didn't come from below anymore. It was above me, in the rafters. Something moved in the dark. Slow, coiling. I raised the gun toward the ceiling. "You're not Cal." "Neither was he," the voice said. A shape dropped from the beams, fast and heavy, and landed just behind me. I spun and fired. The flash lit the attic in a burst of violent white. The thing collapsed backward. But there was no scream, no blood. Just a shudder that echoed through the boards like something caught mid-transformation. I stepped closer, still aiming, ready to shoot again. It was a body, curled on its side, wearing my old clothes, jeans, a torn hoodie from college. It looked like Cal, but the proportions were off. The neck too long, the limbs too thin. And when I leaned closer, I saw the skin along the jawline twitching, as if it hadn't settled on a face yet. It opened its eyes. They were mine, and they were crying. I pulled the trigger again. The shot hit its forehead and sent the body limp. But then the mouth split open, sideways this time, tearing across the cheeks like scissors through fabric. And a voice underneath the voice spoke through the blood. That wasn't me. The thing evaporated, turned to dust, gone, but not defeated, just moved. I ran to the hatch and flung it open. The hallway below was empty, but the house felt tighter. The stairs groaned louder than they should have. The light from the hallway bulbs pulsed like a dying heartbeat. As I descended, I realized something had shifted. Not in the house, but in me. My footsteps didn't echo anymore. My reflection had vanished from the picture frame glass. Even my breath didn't fog the windows. Whatever this thing was, it had taken something from me. My sound. My trace. I was becoming hollow. I made it to the living room. The red door was back. Not freestanding this time. It had merged into the house, replacing the fireplace entirely. The stone and brick had twisted into its frame like vines pulled from the soil. The door no longer stood slightly ajar. It was wide open now, revealing a corridor beyond it, long and narrow, disappearing into a fog too dense to see through. There was no wind, no sound, just a low, pulsing thrum that I felt in my teeth. I stepped forward, revolver still raised. But before I crossed the threshold, I heard a whisper behind me. Soft, gentle, like a prayer in a child's voice. "I'm still Nathan," it said. I turned around and saw myself standing in the hallway. No weapon, no fear, just calm eyes and that same subtle smile. Then a second one stepped out behind it. Another me. Then a third. Each one a little less human. The last one dragged its feet and twitched with every motion, like a puppet learning how to walk. Its skin hung too loose around the bones. The smile never left any of their faces. I backed toward the red door. And from within the corridor, another voice called out. Not mine, not Cal's. Something older. Pick a name. Or lose them all. I didn't understand it, until I realized what the ritual had really done. Burning Cal's name didn't destroy him. It unmoored him. It set him adrift in the house's memory, and the house wasn't letting him go. It had warned him, warned me, and now it was making more. More Nathans, more echoes. Soon, the world wouldn't remember which one was real, and maybe neither would I. I stepped through the red door, into the corridor. It was time to find the one who started all this. The moment I stepped through the red door, everything changed. It wasn't just the light, or the absence of it. It was the way space folded around me. There was no temperature, no scent, no weight to my steps. The floor felt real, yet didn't make a sound beneath my boots. The walls of the corridor were impossibly smooth, almost skin, like with no seams or edges, stretching on endlessly in either direction. I didn't know how long I'd been walking. The farther I went, the less I remembered why I'd come in. Thoughts started slipping, falling behind me like breadcrumbs I couldn't reach. My name felt strange in my mouth, like a word I'd memorized in a dream and was slowly forgetting how to pronounce. Then, finally, something changed. A light ahead, dim, pulsing like a wound blinking open and shut. As I approached, the corridor narrowed, walls tightening until I had to turn sideways just to move. I pushed through until the space yawned open into a vast circular chamber, silent as a grave, lit only by flickering crimson lanterns suspended in the black air. In the center of the room stood another door, this one massive, ancient, made of dark stone with veins of red light pulsing beneath its surface like magma trapped under skin. Symbols covered it, not painted, not carved, ground. They shifted if I looked too long, like worms swimming through meat. Before the door, a figure stood hunched, still, waiting. It wore robes that looked soaked, tattered, and too long for its form. Its hands, pale and brittle as bone, hung limp at its sides. It had no face, just a blank stretch of flesh where features should have been, as if the idea of a face had been scrubbed off by time. But even with no eyes, it looked at me. "You walked through your own ending," it said, voice low, layered with too many mouths to count. "Do you remember why?" "I want Cal," I answered, though my voice sounded thin here, half eaten by the air. It turned slightly, and I could feel its attention pressing down on me like hands over my shoulders. "There is no Cal. There is only what he gave up." I stepped forward, fists clenched, revolver forgotten at my side. "You took his name." "No," it said. "He gave it freely, to keep you safe, and you spent it like firewood." I wanted to scream, but the room swallowed noise like water swallows sparks. "I burned his name to save him." "And in doing so," it said, "you made room." The floor shifted beneath me, wet, breathing, and suddenly 100 eyes opened in the stone, all blinking in unison, all staring through me. I stepped back, heart pounding, as a low moan swept through the chamber. The robed figure stepped aside, revealing something behind the stone door, a mural drawn in blood. It showed dozens of red doors, hundreds, stretching across fields, forests, cities. Every one of them surrounded by faces, identical, repeating, blank-eyed and smiling. The creature spoke again, softer this time. "You were never the first, and you will not be the last." My knees buckled. The mural continued, past doors, past faces. In the final panel, there was just a mirror. Alone. Standing in a field of ash, a reflection of me inside it, but older, bones showing through stretched skin, smile permanent, mouth unblinking. The stone door behind the figure pulsed. And then I heard Cal's voice, weak, like it was underwater. "Nathan, please. I'm still here. Don't let him keep me." I rushed forward. The figure didn't move. I grabbed the edge of the stone door, but it burned my hands, white, hot pain that sank straight into the bones. Still, I pulled. I used my whole body. The door groaned, resisting. But then it cracked open just a sliver. A gust of cold air blasted through, carrying with it a stench I can't describe, earth, rot, memory. And then a hand reached out. Small, shaking. Cal's. I grabbed it, felt his fingers tighten around mine. But before I could pull him through, something else grabbed his arm from the other side. Another hand, black, twisted, inhuman, claws digging into his skin. I pulled harder. Cal screamed. The stone door bucked in its frame. Then the robed figure lifted one hand, and the chamber screamed. Not sound, not even vibration. Just memory, all of it, being stripped from me like layers of skin. I saw every moment I'd ever shared with Cal flicker across the walls, one by one, faster and faster, until they weren't mine anymore. My grip weakened. But then I remembered the note, the one Cal gave me before he vanished. "Don't trust the one who knocks." I didn't knock. I kicked. I drove my foot into the door with everything I had. It shattered. The room exploded in light. And then, silence. When I woke, I was back in the house. The attic. It was morning. The window was open. Birds sang. The sky was blue. For the first time in weeks, everything was normal. But something was wrong. My hands were smaller, my arms thinner. I rushed to the mirror. It was Cal's face, and I smiled. The smile faded slowly as I stared at my reflection. It was subtle at first, something barely noticeable beneath the swell of confusion rising in my chest. My face, my eyes, my hair, none of it belonged to me. I lifted my hand slowly, and the mirror copied the motion, but the movement felt borrowed, not mine. I reached up and touched my cheek. The skin was real, warm, smooth in a way I hadn't felt since I was a teenager. I turned my face slightly and studied the shape of my jaw, the old scar above my eyebrow, the one Cal got after falling from the shed roof when we were kids. This was his face, his body. I stumbled back from the mirror, breath caught in my throat, hands trembling as if my muscles didn't understand how to move anymore. I was inside Cal, or something wearing him, or I had become him. The lines were so thin now I couldn't tell what was memory and what was invasion. I looked around the attic. It was untouched, perfectly arranged, like it had been waiting for this moment. The cot was freshly made. The candle had burned out, but the salt circle was still there, unbroken. None of it made sense. Downstairs, I heard movement. Not footsteps, just sound. A low humming, steady and rhythmic. The same lullaby Mom used to sing when she thought we were asleep. My stomach twisted. I moved to the attic hatch, slid it open slowly, and peered down the steps. Light drifted upward, warm, normal, but it was wrong. Too normal. It reminded me of the red doors trick, how it made things feel safe, just long enough to lure you through. I descended the stairs cautiously. The walls looked cleaner than I remembered. The bloodstains were gone. The cracks were sealed. Even the air smelled different, fresh wood and lemon oil, the way the house used to smell in spring. I reached the bottom step and turned into the living room. Someone was sitting on the couch. It was me. My real self. The version I'd known for decades. He was leaned back, remote in hand, casually flipping through television channels, unfazed. He didn't even turn when I entered. "Sleep okay?" he asked without looking. My throat was dry. "What is this?" he shrugged. "Home." I stepped closer, heart pounding. The gun was gone, left behind in the other place, but I gripped the edge of the nearest chair just in case. "You're not me," I said. "Maybe not," he replied. "But I remember everything you do. That should count for something." He finally looked at me, and the smile he gave was small, friendly, pitying. "You broke the door, Nate. Good job." "Really? But did you think that would fix everything? You have my face. So do you," he said, nodding at me. "But does it feel right?" He stood up slowly. Same posture, same weight. Every movement familiar, like watching myself in a home movie. Then he tilted his head. "You walked through," he said. "You made a trade. That place never lets you leave empty-handed." "I didn't trade," I whispered. "I pulled Cal out. I saved him." "You pulled something out," he said with a quiet chuckle. "But it wasn't him." My chest tightened. "No," I said, shaking my head. He grabbed my hand. I saw his face. I felt his fingers. "You felt something?" he said. "But you were too late. That version of Cal, the boy you knew, that was gone the moment he gave up his name. What's left in your attic isn't your brother. And what's walking around in your skin now?" He pointed at me. "That isn't you." I couldn't move, couldn't speak. "Look outside," he said gently. I turned to the window. The world beyond the glass was wrong. The trees were too still, the sky too bright, the sun didn't move. The neighbors' houses stood in place, but they didn't breathe. It was like staring at a painting. Frozen. False. A copy made by something that didn't understand what living felt like. "This is where echoes go when they lose their names," he said behind me. "You're not in your world anymore. You never left the red door. You just switched places." I turned back around. The living room was empty. No TV, no couch, no lights, just darkness. I was alone. I ran to the door, yanked it open. A red field stretched beyond it. Endless. Dozens of doors scattered across the plain like gravestones. Some stood upright. Some had collapsed. Some were splintered into kindling. I stepped outside and felt the weight of 1,000 eyes buried beneath the dirt. Every step stirred something deep below, like the ground itself was remembering. In the distance, one door stood taller than the rest, still whole, still closed. I walked toward it. Maybe it led home. Maybe it led deeper. But one thing was certain, it had my name carved into it. And the knob was turning from the other side. I didn't run. I should have, but my legs wouldn't allow it. The door in the field, taller than the others, dark and heavy, stood with my name carved deep into its wood. Not scratched or burned, but engraved in a way that looked grown, like the word had sprouted there over time. The knob, iron, black and slick with something that reflected no light, was already half turned by the time I reached it. Something on the other side was coming through, but slowly, like it didn't need to rush, like it knew I'd stay, like it had been promised me. I stopped 6 feet from the threshold. That seemed to be the distance it allowed. I didn't cross it, and it didn't push forward. The door held, trembling slightly in its frame, as if caught in some invisible wind. The field behind me was silent. The sky above remained flat and bruised. Sunless, moonless, just a dull red glow that never brightened or dimmed. The only sound was the slow, wet turn of the knob and the deep, regular breathing that came with it. Human, almost, but deeper, hungrier. Then the voice came again, mine, not echoing from the door, but from everywhere. From the cracked doors scattered across the field, from the dirt under my feet, from the windless air around my head. You came here looking for answers, it said. You thought this was about saving someone, a brother, a boy. But it's never been about Kyle. It's about you. It's always been about you. I clenched my fists, jaw locked, trying to push the fear back down into something manageable. Then tell me, what am I? You are the question we left unanswered, the voice said. You are the knock no one dared to open. You are the story no one finished writing. And then the door opened. It didn't swing, it peeled. The wood split in the center and unfolded like torn flesh, edges curling outward to reveal a corridor made of mirrors. Tall, arched slabs of black glass stretched in either direction, each one reflecting a different version of me. Some older, some younger, some dressed in clothes I'd never worn, standing in places I'd never been, all staring back at me with the same expression, recognition. Not surprise, not fear, just quiet, solemn knowing. I stepped inside. The mirrors didn't crack. They didn't distort. They welcomed. I walked the corridor slowly, scanning each face. Some versions of me were smiling. Others were weeping. One reached out and placed his hand against the glass. I did the same. Our palms touched. There was no cold, no resistance, no ripple, and then he spoke without opening his mouth. His behind all of us. I pulled my hand back. The glass shimmered. Something moved behind the reflection. A shadow without shape, rising slowly, stretching itself from corner to corner until the mirror blackened entirely. I turned to the next. Another version of me. This one wore a noose around his neck. His lips were blue, eyes open but blank, and carved into his forehead were the same 6 letters, not N. The shadow appeared behind him too. Then behind the next, and the next. Each mirror was a variation. Each Nathan trapped in a different ending, and in every one, the shadow was always watching. I walked faster, tried not to look, but each face seemed to flinch just as I passed, as if I was walking past my own funeral again and again. At the end of the corridor was another door. Not red, not wood. This one was glass, completely see-through, a thin barrier between me and a vast black chamber beyond. And inside that room stood a man. Alone, wearing my face, wearing a suit I'd never owned, eyes pale, Smile soft, a mimicry of comfort. He waved. I didn't move. He stepped closer to the glass, resting his forehead against it. Then he spoke, with my voice, but slower, older. Shed the name, and I'll set you free. No, I whispered. It's mine. Not anymore, he said, smiling wider. You gave it up the moment you opened the red door, and now I wear it better than you ever did. I didn't open it. You wanted to. Silence. Then he leaned back and gestured behind him. A circle of chairs sat in the darkness, all occupied, all full of Nathans. Every one of them looking at me, none of them speaking. The man placed his hand on the glass. You are not the original, and if you stay here long enough, you won't even be you. I reached into my coat pocket for something. Anything. But there was nothing there. No revolver, no drawings, no locket, just a name, and it was beginning to feel heavier by the second. The man stepped back into the dark. The other Nathans rose from their chairs, and the mirror corridor behind me began to close. Panels of glass folding in on themselves, sealing off every reflection I had passed, one by one, erasing the evidence that I'd ever existed. I had to choose. Go forward, toward the man wearing my name, or turn back and be lost in the house that remembered nothing. And from deep within the blackness, a voice I hadn't heard in days echoed softly, Nate. It was Cal again, still calling, still waiting, somewhere past the copies, past the names, maybe past the end itself. I stood at the edge of the glass chamber, my reflection fractured and ghosting in the clear surface between me and the thing wearing my name. My hand hovered near the seam, not touching, just trembling inches from what might have been a doorway or a trap. Behind me, the corridor was closing. Every mirrored panel snapped shut in a steady rhythm, like a ticking clock moving toward its final chime. Each thud behind me erased a version of myself. Memories whispered faintly in their wake. Moments I hadn't yet lived, names I hadn't yet forgotten, choices never made but still regretted. They vanished like smoke the moment I turned to chase them. In front of me, the man, myself, stood calmly beside that ring of chairs, waiting, patient, hands folded like a funeral director watching mourners file past an open casket. The other Nathans stood around him, silent and still, like wax figures in a museum no one visited. Their eyes followed me, though their faces didn't move. Some were tired, others were afraid, but none resisted. They were already gone, just echoes clinging to flesh. I pressed my palm to the glass. It didn't resist. It let me through. No sound, no barrier. Just a shift in the air as I crossed from memory into something deeper, something that felt like core. The floor was cold, the space endless, no ceiling in sight. The only illumination came from within. From us, from all of us. As if every version of me carried a dying ember in the chest, just bright enough to see the next step. I walked past them slowly. Each face blinked in silence as I moved through the ring. One Nathan had no eyes. Another had stitched lips. One rocked slightly, murmuring numbers to himself with teeth that looked too new to belong to someone that worn. The man in the center gestured to a chair. "This is the end of the trail," he said softly. "You've been walking in your own footsteps. You just didn't know it." I didn't sit. "Where's Cal?" He didn't flinch at the name. Instead, he pointed upward. I followed the gesture. High above us, past the abyss, was a single door, free floating, glowing with that same red hue I'd come to hate. It spun slowly in the void, as if suspended on the edge of thought. And behind it I felt him, not his body, not his voice, his presence. The last piece. "I came for him," I said louder now. "Not for this. Not for any of this." "You came to know who you are," he replied, stepping forward. "You chased him because you believed you were the one who could save him. But the truth is, Cal never left. Not the way you think." My pulse thudded hard. "What do you mean?" The man smiled. "Do you remember the attic? The night you burned his name? That wasn't an exorcism. That was a bargain. You offered something in return. No, I said, voice shaking. I didn't offer anything? You stayed, he said, and that was enough. Behind me, the circle of Nathans began to move. Not toward me. Away. They were walking to the edges of the room, each returning to their own mirrored walls, stepping into place like chess pieces sliding back into storage. The man and I were alone now. He stepped closer until our faces were inches apart. I was the first, he whispered. The first Nathan to open the red door. The first to lose himself in trying to pull someone else out. It was my brother back then. A different name. A different house. But the same mistake. The same outcome. I stepped back. My knees were weak. Then this whole thing, it just keeps happening. Over and over. He nodded once. Until one of us finishes it. My breath caught. How? He pointed to the revolver that had reappeared at my side. Rusted now, worn down to bare metal, but still loaded. There's only one real Nathan left, he said. The house won't allow two. Not anymore. The name doesn't belong to both of us. I understood, but I hated it. This was the door's final rule. Only one of us walks away. Only one name survives. He stepped back, opened his arms, and tilted his head slightly, inviting me to choose. I raised the revolver. He didn't move. I could feel the pressure building. The corridor behind me gone. The circle fading. The name inside me growing heavier by the second. Then I said it aloud, my full name, clear. Steady, it echoed through the chamber, bouncing off every wall, filling the void. He smiled sadly, and he vanished. No shot fired. No blood. Just gone. Like a name erased from a headstone no one visited anymore. The chamber around me collapsed, not violently but slowly, like a memory being overwritten. The glass faded. The doors dissolved. And then I was standing in the attic. The real attic. Dust in the air. The cot behind me. The sun just beginning to rise through the window. I stumbled to my knees, gasping, touching the floor, the walls, the grain of wood beneath my fingers. Real. Solid. Home. Then I heard a sound, from behind the attic wall. A gentle knock, 3 times, soft, and a voice. Nate. It was twisted, not echoed, just Cal. Small, scared, alive. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just sat there in the attic, knees pressed to the dust, covered floor, staring at the far wall like it might breathe. The knock had been soft, not menacing, not demanding, but desperate, familiar. And then came the voice, Cal's. Not warped or echoed, not layered with other mouths, or stretched into some mockery of innocence. It was the voice I remembered, the one I hadn't heard in its pure form since he was 10 years old. Fragile, trembling, waiting. Nate. I crawled toward the wall on instinct. My fingers dug through the dust, finding the floorboards looser here, the way I remembered them being when we were kids and used to hide little notes beneath them. Drawings, secrets, and promises we never planned to keep. My breath came in shallow gasps, the dust choking in the morning light slanting through the attic window. I pressed my ear to the wood. Nothing at first, just the beat of my own heart. Then, scratching. Delicate, rhythmic, like a child's fingers gently tracing patterns on the inside of a coffin lid. I whispered, Cal. The scratching stopped. Silence. Then, it's dark in here. My chest caved under the weight of that sentence, because I believed it deeply, completely. Whatever Cal was now, however long it had been, he had never left this place. He'd been behind the wall the entire time, lost between whatever real and unreal spaces the red door had torn open. The ritual hadn't destroyed him. It hadn't even freed him. It just pushed him sideways, deeper into the house's bones. I'm gonna get you out, I said aloud, voice shaking. No, he replied. You have to forget me. That's the only way it ends. I recoiled from the wall. No, you don't get to say that. Not after all of this. You don't understand. Nate, he whispered. The house remembers. The longer you hold on to me, the more it uses me. I'm not just behind the wall anymore. I'm in it. I reached for the crowbar I kept under the cot, fingers tightening around the cold metal. I didn't care what he said. I couldn't. I wouldn't leave him in the dark again. I jammed the end between two boards and pulled hard. Nails screamed from the wood as the board lifted, splitting splinters and snapping at the edges. I kept prying. Another board, then another. Behind them, the insulation was soaked. Mold black, rotten. The smell hit me hard, wet and old, like time had decayed into the fibers. I pulled that back too, and then I saw it, a small space. No larger than a crawl space, and inside a figure. Cal, or something shaped like him. He was curled into himself, knees to chest, skin like wax, pale and translucent. His eyes were open but unfocused, blinking slowly in the way someone blinks in a dream they can't wake from. His lips moved, but no sound came out. His chest rose and fell, slow. Shallow. He was alive. Barely. I reached in, but the moment my hand crossed the threshold into the space, something changed. The air thickened. The wood groaned. My breath clouded and fell to the floor like smoke made heavy by gravity. I tried to pull back but couldn't. My hand kept reaching on its own, past my wrist, up my forearm, until my fingers touched his, cold, but not dead. And then everything around me, the attic, the light, the warmth, was gone. I was back in the corridor of mirrors, only now there were no reflections. Just dark panes of glass, all facing inward. And in the center of the space, sitting alone, was Cal. The real Cal. Not a mimic, not a vessel, just him. He looked up at me, and his face wasn't scared. It was tired. Exhausted in a way no child should ever look. "Nate," he said softly, "you can't pull me out. You have to push yourself back in." "What are you talking about?" I asked, heart pounding. "This place is built from memory," he said, "and yours are cracked. You keep tearing new doors every time you try to find me." I dropped to my knees beside him. "I'm not leaving without you. You never left," he whispered. "That's the trick. You've been in the wall ever since you tried to open the red door the first time. I didn't vanish. You did." The words hit like a hammer. I tried to speak, but nothing came. "You left your name behind," he said. "It wandered, grew legs, got curious. Now it's been walking around without you, living without you." I looked down at my hands. They didn't feel like mine anymore. Too smooth, too clean. "You can take it back," Cal said. "But you'll have to stay. Someone has to stay." My mouth went dry. "I'm not leaving you here." "I know," he said. "That's why you're going to stay with me." Behind us, the mirrors cracked. All at once. 1,000 spiderweb fractures spread through every panel, each one reflecting a different version of me. Twisting, fading, vanishing. The corridor shuddered. The air began to collapse inward, folding the space into itself. Cal held out his hand. I didn't hesitate. I took it. And then we were back in the attic. Both of us. Breathing. Alive. The space behind the wall was empty now. The rot was gone. The boards were clean. The house was quiet. But something in me knew this wasn't the end. Because outside, the grass was dying again, and there was a new door standing at the edge of the field. Smaller. Wooden. And carved into it, for the first time, Caleb Warren. It didn't move, and it didn't breathe. Not yet. But the door at the edge of the field didn't need to do anything more than stand there. That was enough. It wasn't like the first one, the tall, red sentinel that loomed and whispered and blood. This one was plain, weather-worn, the kind of door you might find at the back of a forgotten farmhouse. Its edges were splintered, its panels swollen with damp, but carved across the center in jagged, childlike scrawl was a name no door should have known: Caleb Warren. We stood on the porch, Cal and I, staring out at the field in silence. The morning wind had turned cold again. The grass beyond the porch rail was darkening at the edges, curling at the tips like it had been burned from beneath. And though the sky was still blue, it felt thin, painted on, stretched too tightly over something immense and hungry. Cal didn't speak. He didn't have to. I could see it in the way he leaned forward slightly, eyes glassy, mouth pressed into a thin line. He knew the same way I did. This was no beginning. It was a continuation, a ripple. The cost of pulling him out, of holding on to something the house was meant to forget. "That's not your door," I said carefully, as if the words themselves could change the shape of what waited in the grass. His voice came out low, almost embarrassed. "But it has my name. That doesn't mean it belongs to you." He looked at me then, for real. No haze in the eyes, no distant echo in the face, just my brother, flesh and breath and fear. "You think it's for someone else?" "No," I said. "I think it's for who you used to be." Cal's lips parted, but he didn't speak, just nodded slightly. The wind shifted, and the field seemed to sigh. Leaves twisted in the dry air. The door hadn't moved, not visibly, but it felt closer than it had the moment before. I turned to go back inside, but Cal didn't follow. "We should burn it," I said. "It won't let us," he replied. "We're part of it now." I almost told him he was wrong, that we were free, that we'd done what no one else had and come back. But I didn't, because deep down, I knew the truth. You don't leave a place like that. Not fully. Not ever. You walk out with pieces still inside. And sometimes, if you listen hard enough, you can hear them scratching to get out. Later that night, I found Cal in the kitchen, just sitting at the table with his arms folded, watching the trees. He looked tired, even more than before, like time had found him again and was racing to catch up. His fingernails were stained with something dark. Dirt, I thought. Or maybe ash. When I asked what he was thinking about, he said, "There's someone else inside the house." I froze. "What do you mean?" He didn't look at me. Just said, "I hear footsteps in the attic, not yours, and not mine." We went upstairs together, flashlight in hand, revolver gripped tight. The hatch creaked open easy, and the attic was exactly as we'd left it. Caught in the corner. Salt circles smeared from our last night here. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. Then I saw it. A new drawing on the wall, pinned up with a nail that hadn't been there the day before. A child's sketch. Crude lines, shaky strokes. It showed the house. Our house. And standing in every window, on every floor, was a figure. Tall, thin, no face. Just a smear of black where a mouth should be. Cal stared at it for a long time before saying, "He was there before me. Before any of us. That's what the doors lead to. Not just to somewhere. To him." The words chilled the air. He stepped back and whispered, "I think he made the doors." We burned the drawing, tossed it into the fireplace, watched it curl and blacken and collapse into soot. But that night, I woke up to find Cal gone. I searched the house, the yard, the woods. It was just before dawn when I found him, standing in the field, right in front of the door. The one with his name. His hand was on the knob. He turned slowly when I called his name. His face was streaked with tears. "I just want it to stop," he said. "I know," I replied, "but it won't. That's not what it does." He looked at the door like it was whispering only to him. "I hear them now," he said. "The others, the ones who stayed. They're still in there." I walked forward, slowly, carefully, until I was beside him. The door didn't open, but it felt like it was breathing between us. "You don't have to answer," I said. "But I already did," he replied. The moment I saw it, I didn't try to pull him away. I just stood there with him. Two brothers, two survivors, two pieces left behind by something older than either of us could understand. And in the silence, the field sighed again. The door remained closed. But it remembered. The door didn't open that morning. Not when we stood before it. Not when Cal whispered his name through clenched teeth. It just waited, still and knowing, like a wound that hadn't begun to bleed yet. We stayed in the field for hours, saying nothing. At some point, Cal sat down in the grass beside it and stared at the wood as if it were something he had to memorize, like it might vanish if he blinked too long. I didn't sit. I couldn't. The earth felt wrong beneath me, too warm, like breath trapped in soil. The same pressure that came from behind the red door now lingered around this one, softer but deeper, like it had taken root in our bones. It was past noon when Cal finally spoke. "They're not gone." I turned toward him. "The ones before," he said. "The other doors. The people. The names. They're still inside it. Not alive. Not dead. Just echoing." I didn't ask how he knew. I could see it in his face. His eyes were distant again, not empty, but full of noise. Too much. His voice trembled in a way that said he wasn't guessing. He was hearing them. He stood and placed a hand on the door again, fingertips resting in the grooves of his name. "Some of them are still waiting. They don't know they've been forgotten." A chill sank through my spine, slow and bitter. That was the door's trick. It wasn't just a passage. It was a mirror for grief. It wore the shape of what you'd lost and offered it back, just long enough to keep you looking. And if you stared too long, it stared back through you. That night, I woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Slow, barefoot, dragging. I crept out of bed and followed them in the dark. No lights. Just the pale stretch of moon through the window panes. The house groaned under the weight of memory, like it resented being awake again. At the end of the hall, the attic hatch was open, a faint creaking above. I climbed the steps, one at a time, revolver tucked tight in both hands. The attic was empty. No Cal. No drawings. But in the corner, a shape sat facing the wall. I raised the gun. It didn't move. Didn't breathe. "Cal," I whispered. The figure didn't turn, but I heard it speak, soft, hoarse, too weak to be threatening. I left something behind. I stepped closer. The candlelight flickered low behind me, casting my shadow across the floor. The shape shifted slightly. I think part of me never left this room. I circled it slow, heart stuttering with every breath. It wasn't Cal. It was smaller, thinner, a child's frame, wearing the clothes Cal had on the night he vanished 13 years ago. I fell back, hands trembling, gun nearly slipping from my grip. The child looked up at me. His eyes weren't white or hollow. They were his. Young, terrified, trapped. "Nate," he whispered. I opened my mouth, but no words came. The boy, Cal, or something that had once been Cal, looked down at his hands. They said I could leave if I let them take my voice. So I gave it. I gave everything. But they lied. Behind me, the floor creaked. I spun around. Cal, my Cal, the one I'd brought back, was standing in the hatchway, staring, silent. The two of them locked eyes. Neither moved. The candle sputtered between us. Then the child vanished, gone in an instant, like dust kicked from an old rug. Cal stepped forward. His hands shook. I think I brought him back with me. Or left him behind. I don't know anymore. I reached out, but he pulled away. "The door doesn't take all of you," he said. "It picks the parts that scream loudest and keeps them. What you leave behind becomes its voice." We didn't sleep after that. Instead, we lit every candle in the house and watched the door in the field from the porch. It didn't move. It didn't glow. But it knew. And somehow, I think it was watching us too, waiting for one of us to speak our name again, because that's how it gets in, not through blood. Through identity, memory, grief. Around 3 a.m, the wind shifted. Cold swept across the grass. The door trembled just once. Then, without warning, the ground behind it cracked open. Just a hairline fracture. Just enough to whisper. And I heard my own voice rise from the dirt. "You left me here." I didn't move. I couldn't. The voice that rose from that hairline crack in the earth wasn't just familiar. It was personal. It wasn't mimicry. It wasn't something wearing my voice the way the house wore memories. It was me. Or a version of me. a thread I'd dropped somewhere back along the nightmare path and never bothered to trace. The fracture behind the door was small, barely wide enough to fit a hand, but it pulsed with sound like a speaker buried in the soil. It didn't echo. It whispered, direct and deliberate, like it knew exactly where to aim. "You left me here." Cal turned sharply. He hadn't heard it. His eyes were still fixed on the door itself, unblinking, as if watching for some signal. He didn't even flinch. I opened my mouth, but nothing came. Something in me refused to speak, afraid that answering would give it weight, would lend the voice shape and form and place. I backed off the porch and walked toward the fracture, slowly, boots pressing into the soft, dark grass. The closer I got, the louder it became. Not in volume, but in presence. A pressure behind my eyes, a hum in my spine. The voice shifted as I neared, and suddenly it wasn't just accusing. It was pleading. "I'm still down here," it said. "I remember the red door. I remember the night you stayed in the attic. You walked away, but I didn't." A wind swept through the field, but it didn't touch the trees. Only the door. It creaked on its hinges, not fully opening, not inviting, but stretching, as if remembering how to move, as if reacting to the sound of my guilt. "Behind me," Cal whispered. "Don't answer it." I turned. He hadn't moved. His voice was thin. "It's not you." I looked back at the fracture. It was spreading now, slow and deliberate, crawling through the dirt like a crack through glass. Thin strands of smoke began to rise, dark and sinewy, snaking through the grass, curling around my ankles. I wanted to run. I wanted to pull Cal with me and vanish into the woods. But something about the voice kept me rooted. "You left me the night you heard the knocking," it said. "You locked the door. You told yourself you never heard it, but I did." I dropped to my knees beside the crack. The soil was warm. Breathing, it pushed against my palm with a pulse that didn't match my own. And underneath it all, I could hear crying, not screaming, not fear, just that quiet, childlike sobbing that comes from realizing no one's coming back. I whispered, "What are you?" The ground stopped pulsing. The air froze. Then came the answer, the part of you that believed it wasn't real. And I understood. All of this, the doors, the echoes, the flickering faces, was born from that very denial. From the lie I'd told myself when Cal disappeared. That it was trauma. That it was just darkness. That I'd imagined the breathing house, the creaking attic, the hand that touched mine from beneath the bed. I had split myself to survive. Left the part that believed in monsters buried and hollow, and now it wanted back in. I stood reeling. "You're not me." The voice didn't argue. It didn't need to. Instead, it said, "Then why do I know your first nightmare?" The crack split wider, just enough to reveal an eye. It blinked, and it was mine. Perfect. Brown. Full of everything I refused to feel. I stumbled back. Cal caught me before I hit the ground. He looked pale, worse than before. His skin was graying at the edges, and his breath came shallow. "It's getting closer," he said. "The house, the field, the thing behind the names. We pulled something loose when we broke the door, and now it's unraveling all the way down. We need to end it," I whispered. He nodded. "But not here," he said. "Not in the field." I looked at him, confused. "Then where?" He turned toward the house, the place it started, and I knew what he meant. The attic, where we first heard the knocking, where the red door whispered before it showed itself. We walked back together, the grass crunching underfoot like bones beneath leaves. The house welcomed us with silence. No creaking, no shifting. It had gone still again, as if holding its breath. In the attic everything was the same. The cot, the open floorboards, the faint scent of smoke from the last drawing we'd burned. But something else was waiting now. In the far corner where the wall met the eaves was a door, new, small, child-sized, painted the same red as the first, and in tiny gold letters across the center, etched like an afterthought, was a name neither of us expected to see: Nathan Warren. It didn't belong there, and yet it fit the space like it had always existed, buried beneath layers of years and silence and denial. The door in the attic wasn't wide enough for a grown man to walk through upright. It was child-sized, barely reaching Cal's chest, but it pulsed with the same old heat, the kind that made your gums ache and your ears ring. The same dull hum I remembered from the night Cal vanished, the red door's soundless call, vibrating behind my ribs like a memory I'd tried to kill but never buried deep enough. My name was carved into it this time, not scribbled or scratched, etched, clean, deliberate, as if the house had taken its time, as if it had waited for me to find the truth before showing me the entrance meant for me all along. I took a step forward, and Cal grabbed my wrist. "You don't have to open it," he said. But I did, because that's how it works. The house never forgets. It waits. It watches, and when you're ready, when you're cracked and raw and worn thin, it gives you your door. And mine was open now, whether I wanted it or not. I touched the knob. Cold. It stung my palm like winter steel. I turned it. The door didn't creak or groan. It breathed, a warm gust spilling out, thick with dust and something older than mold. Something metallic, like rust and rot and old breath held too long. I dropped to my knees to crawl through. Cal didn't follow. He knelt beside me, eyes wide but hollow. "If it closes behind you," he said, "don't turn around." I nodded. I didn't ask why, because I already knew. I slipped inside. The crawl space beyond the door was narrow. My shoulders brushed wood on both sides. Nails jutted from beams like teeth. The air was warm, but not in a living way, like the breath of a sick animal hiding in the walls. I crawled for what felt like hours. Time lost meaning. Distance did too. At some point, the boards beneath me gave way to dirt. Damp. Loose, smelling of copper and old rain, and then it opened, into a room. One I knew, because it was mine. My childhood bedroom. Down to every detail. The Star Wars poster half torn in the corner. The nightlight with the crack across the top. The bunk beds, only now the top one was missing. My twin brother's half was gone. Empty, like he'd never been. I stood slowly. The door behind me didn't close, but the light from it dimmed, like dusk had fallen behind me. I walked to the closet and opened it. Inside was a mirror, not glass, polished black stone. I looked into it expecting to see myself, but I didn't. I saw a boy. Small, thin, 8 years old, eyes wide with terror. He sat in the attic, back against the wall, staring at the real red door, the first one. And he was screaming. No sound, just his mouth wide open. His fingers dug into the floorboards. His body shook. He was me. The night I didn't follow Cal. The night I stayed behind and pretended none of it was real. I stepped back. The mirror rippled. The reflection blinked. And this time it stared at me. I turned around. The room had changed. The walls were taller. The bed was gone. The door had vanished. Only the mirror remained. And beside it, a new figure. Tall, faceless, its arms too long. Fingers curled like hooks. No eyes, just dark holes where a face should have been. It stepped forward. 1, 2, 3 paces. It didn't lunge, didn't hiss. It just watched, waiting. And then it raised one hand. A single, trembling finger pointed toward the mirror. Toward the boy. Toward me. And the message was clear. Look, so I did. The boy was still screaming. But now I heard it. Not with my ears. With every part of myself that had been broken and rebuilt over years of silence. He was screaming my name. Over and over. And suddenly I understood. That was the night I disappeared too. Not physically, but the part of me that believed. The part that knew monsters could take your brother in the dark and leave nothing but dust. I reached out and touched the glass. It was warm. The mirror shattered. Not loudly, just a soft, dull crack, like a heart giving out. The room collapsed around me, the floor twisted. The walls fell upward, and then I was back, on the attic floor, face down in dust, coughing, hands shaking. Cal was there. He was pale, sweating, his eyes bloodshot. "You were gone for hours," he said, but I hadn't felt time pass at all. I looked at the red door. It was closed again. My name was gone. Only raw wood remained, and Cal whispered something that made the blood freeze in my veins. "I heard your voice," he said, "on the other side, screaming for me." The attic was too quiet after that, like the house had swallowed its breath and was waiting to exhale. Cal didn't look at me the same anymore. There was a distance in his stare, something behind his eyes that had cracked. Maybe he saw something when I went through that red door. Maybe he'd been hearing my voice for years, even when I wasn't screaming. Either way, whatever silence stood between us now wasn't the ordinary kind. It was the type that lingered after a funeral, after a scream, after truth. We didn't speak for the rest of the night. He slept on the floor near the hatch, his back to the wall, hand wrapped around the grip of the revolver. I didn't sleep at all. I sat with my back to the red door, closed again now, smooth and quiet, as if it had never moved. But I knew it had. I felt it. It had opened for me because it needed to. Because something behind it needed me to remember the parts I'd buried. That version of me. The child who screamed in silence wasn't gone. He was stuck in the house's throat, wedged between time and memory like gristle in a wound. Morning came slow, as if afraid to enter the attic. The light barely reached past the hatch. I woke Cal with a nudge. He looked up, eyes sunken. The revolver was still in his hand. I helped him to his feet. "We need to go back," he said, voice hoarse. "To the field." He shook his head. "No. The woods." I stiffened. We hadn't gone back there since the second door appeared, the one with his name. That part of the land felt wrong. Stretched, like the geography itself had shifted around the truth we didn't want to dig up. But I understood. The woods were where it started. Not the attic. Not the house. It had only spread from here. The rot was rooted in the trees. We packed what little we needed. Salt, rope, 2 knives, the revolver, a flask of oil. Then we walked. The woods were different than I remembered. Not in appearance, still the same crooked trees and damp moss and overgrown path, but in weight. They pressed in harder. The light filtered through in beams too narrow, like everything beyond the path had thickened. Cal didn't look around. He just walked, like he already knew where it would be. I followed. We didn't speak for over an hour. Then Cal stopped. "There." I stepped up beside him. There was a clearing ahead, circular, overgrown, ringed with stones that hadn't been touched in years. But what drew my eyes was the structure in the center. Not a house, not a cabin. A well, short, brick, capped with a rusted iron grate. It looked harmless, until I heard it, breathing, not wind, not echo, breathing, wet, shallow, rhythmic, like lungs the size of a room sat below the soil, pulling air in and pushing it out through the cracks between the stones. Cal walked forward, slow and reverent. "This is where I vanished," he said. I froze. He hadn't told me that. I always thought it had happened at the house, that the attic was where the red door found him. But he shook his head before I even asked. "They took me here first," he said. "The house came after." He knelt at the side of the well and touched the rusted grate. It burned his fingers. He recoiled quickly, swearing under his breath. "What's down there?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just lifted his hand and pointed to the bricks near the base of the structure. Something was carved into them. Names. Hundreds. Maybe thousands. Most of them worn away by weather and time. But a few were fresh. I bent closer, and my stomach dropped. They weren't written names. They were etched from the inside out, as if something had clawed them into the stone from below. My name was among them. So was Cal's. And another. Mom. I staggered back, nearly dropping the knife. "She never left," Cal said. "She was the first one who heard the knocking." That didn't make sense. I remembered Mom. Her laugh. Her voice. The way she used to hum old folk songs in the kitchen. I remembered the way she cried the night Cal disappeared. How she searched for weeks, months, until she started to unravel. But now, she never made it to the kitchen that night, he said. That wasn't her. Something clenched in my chest. She was already here, Cal whispered. I looked down at the well. The breathing had stopped. It was listening. I took a step forward. So did Cal. Then the grate shifted. Only slightly. Just enough to send a groan through the bricks. We froze. And then, rising from beneath, came a sound that split the world in two. Not a scream. Not a roar. A lullaby. The same one she used to hum in the kitchen. But twisted. Sour. Each note pulled too long, bent sharp at the end like a cracked music box. It came from deep within the well, and with it came movement. Hands. Gray. Thin. Fingernails split and bloody. They wrapped around the edge of the grate and pushed. The hands pushed harder against the iron grate, straining with a grotesque patience. The brick rim cracked beneath them. Dust plumed into the morning air. Cal backed away slowly, revolver raised, but his hands were shaking. I gripped the knife tighter. There was no sound now, no birds, no wind. Just that lullaby, warped, slow, spilling up from the dark like it was dripping through rusted pipes. Each note twisted my stomach. That lullaby had rocked us to sleep when we were kids, had followed us through nightmares. Now it was being pulled apart note by note like sinew being peeled from bone. Then a face began to rise behind the bars. Or something close to one. The eyes came first. Empty, but not hollow. They were glassy, like boiled milk, opaque and unnatural. They didn't blink. They just stared straight at us, wide and unbreaking. The skin around them was slack, too pale, and wet like old paper soaked in rain. Then the mouth appeared, smiling, not with kindness, with memory. A smile so perfectly rehearsed it made my blood go cold. It wore our mother's face. Not perfectly. Just enough to twist the heart, just enough to confuse the mind and make it hesitate. Cal stepped forward before I could stop him. "Don't," I hissed. "That's not her." He didn't listen. His voice cracked when he said, "Mom." The thing didn't answer. Its lips moved in rhythm with the lullaby, but it never spoke. It only watched him, curling its fingers tighter around the grate until the flesh split and blood thick, black sludge that hissed on the stone. Then it began to pull itself up. Its spine scraped the iron, bending with sickening cracks as more of its torso emerged. Beneath the loose, water-logged skin was something wrong. Something that twitched with too many joints. Bones that moved like rope. There were no clothes. Just strands of hair hanging like seaweed across its chest. But its face, that face, remained intact, undamaged, as if the house preserved it perfectly to ensure hesitation. Cal took another step. "Don't," I repeated, louder this time. He paused. The creature lifted one hand and reached toward him through the bars. It spoke. Only one word. Caleb. His name. Not screamed. Not growled. Spoken. Like she used to when calling us to the table. I stepped between them, and it changed. The eyes went from glassy white to ink black in an instant. The smile vanished. The mouth opened too wide, far wider than it should have, and the voice that came out wasn't hers. "You left her." The wind returned. Hard, hot, smelling of iron and rot. I didn't move. I held my ground as the thing reached again, but this time for me. I stabbed. Hard. The blade sank into its palm. It didn't flinch. It didn't bleed. It laughed. The sound echoed around the clearing, bouncing between the trees like children's voices in a church basement. It yanked the knife from my hand and dropped it behind the bars. Then it whispered, "You brought her back," and it let go. It didn't crawl out. It fell back, vanished into the dark like it had never been. Silence returned. Cal dropped to his knees, his face pale, wet with sweat. "She's in the house," he whispered. I looked down into the well. It was still again. Empty. Just bricks and black. "How do you know?" I asked. He looked up at me. because she was humming that lullaby last night. I heard it. Upstairs. In the attic. My stomach turned. We had to go back. Not because we wanted to. Because we had to. Because something wearing our mother's voice, her face, was walking through that house, leaving pieces of her behind like breadcrumbs. And it wanted us to follow. We ran. All the way back. No words. Just the sound of boots on dirt and the pounding of our hearts. When we reached the house, the front door was already open. A trail of damp footprints led from the porch to the stairs. Upward. Into the attic. We followed them, every step heavier than the last. The walls whispered as we climbed. Little clicks and breaths and creaks that didn't match our steps. The air was thicker now, saturated with mildew and something old. The smell of a cellar that had never been opened. When we reached the attic, the door was closed. Not the red one, the regular one, the one we always left cracked open because it never latched right. Now it was shut. I grabbed the handle. It was warm. I turned it slowly and pushed. Inside, the attic was lit by candlelight, but we hadn't left any candles burning. They stood in circles, 9 of them, each with a photo pinned beneath. Photos from our childhood. Meet Cal. Mom. Dad. Even the ones we'd burned years ago. All somehow intact. Restored. In the center of the attic stood a figure. Back turned. Hair long wet, tangled down her back. She was humming. The same lullaby. The same broken notes. Cal stepped forward. Mom. She turned. And everything in me screamed. Because it was her. But not as we remembered. Her eyes were stitched shut with black thread, her jaw unhinged slightly, hanging loose at the right corner. Her hands were raw, fingers cracked down to the bone, palms slick with blood, but her voice was perfect. She opened her arms and smiled. "Welcome home," she said. She took a step forward, arms still outstretched like a mother welcoming her lost sons. But her feet didn't move. She glided. A sick, unnatural drift across the attic floor, toes never lifting, shoulders rocking with a fluid rhythm that reminded me of marionettes. My body screamed to run, but my feet wouldn't listen. Cal didn't move either. His hand dropped to his side, away from the revolver. His jaw slackened. He was staring not at the stitches over her eyes, not at her broken mouth or the dried blood on her nightgown, but at the pendant around her neck. It was hers. Our mother's. Oval? Gold, framed, with the picture of us inside. Aged 5, Cal smiling too wide, me fidgeting with the collar of my shirt. We gave it to her the Christmas before she started unraveling. I hadn't seen it since the funeral, but there she stood, smiling with lips too wide, and that pendant resting against her chest like no time had passed. "Mom," Cal said, his voice raw and breaking. She tilted her head. "I never left," she whispered. Her voice was wrong, not in pitch. It was her tone, her cadence, the warmth in her inflection. But it came out like a song slowed down on a warped cassette. Familiar, but bent at the edges. I stepped in front of Cal. He didn't resist. She stopped a few feet from me. The scent hit first. Formaldehyde, wet wool, and old rot, like she'd been soaking in the ground, waiting for spring. Her stitched eyes didn't move, but I felt her watching me, felt her smile stretch wider. "You left me," she said, this time with a hint of anger, a slight tremble in the floorboards. "No," I replied, steadying myself. "You were already gone." A silence fell between us. The attic held its breath. Then, slowly, she lifted her hand and pointed to the far wall. The wood groaned. The wallpaper peeled back on its own, curling away like it was ashamed of what lay beneath. Carved into the wall, etched deep enough to bleed sap, were more names. Hundreds. Thousands. But they weren't random. Each one was someone we knew. Neighbors. Friends. Teachers. Childhood crushes. Town drunks. The entire history of our street was scratched into the beams, along with dates, some decades old, others only weeks. And at the center, circled over and over in what looked like dry blood, was my own. Nathan Warren. Cal's name sat just below. "I saved you," the thing said. I turned back to her, heart pounding. Saved us from what? Her stitched eyes bled. From behind the black threads, red tears welled and ran down her cheeks in trembling lines. "The knock," she said. "The red door. It takes what it's owed." My mouth went dry. "What does it want?" She shivered, then raised her chin as if listening to something in the ceiling. "It wants to come through." The air thickened. Cal reached for the revolver again, slowly, gently. The figure twitched, suddenly jerking forward like a puppet yanked by an impatient hand. Her jaw cracked open wider, bone snapping, tongue uncoiling in one long, sick strand before retracting with a wet snap. Then she screamed. It was the sound of wood splintering under a boot, of fingernails against concrete, of metal twisting inside a blender. We hit the floor, hands over our ears. Blood rushed in my head. The candles went out. The attic turned pitch black. Only her scream remained. Then silence. A moment later, the room lit again. Not with firelight, but with a dull, red glow from beneath the floorboards. The same glow from the red door. But there was no door here. It was coming from under us. She was gone. Vanished. No body. No breath. Only a thin trail of black sludge that slithered from where she stood toward the center of the floor. We stood up slowly, and Cal lifted the loose plank we'd found years ago. Under it was a stairwell, narrow, stone, descending into red light, a new passage the house had been hiding. Cal looked at me, face pale but set. "Whatever's down there," he said. "It's what took her. It's what took everything." I nodded, and we went down. Each step thudded with a weight not our own. The air grew thicker, hotter, the deeper we moved. The walls closed in. The light intensified. At the bottom of the stairwell was a chamber. Stone walls, slick with moss and heat. The red glow came from a circle in the center, carved with symbols I couldn't understand but felt down to my marrow. At its edge stood a single figure. Not Cal. Not me, but Dad. He turned when we entered. Eyes black, mouth stitched. And around his neck, the same pendant. He didn't blink. He didn't breathe. He only stood there, inches from the glowing circle, head slightly tilted like he was listening to a whisper, coming from somewhere deep beneath the floor. The red light cast shadows that shouldn't have existed, sharp angles that stretched up the walls, shifting like hands reaching toward the ceiling. My father hadn't aged. Not a wrinkle. Not a gray strand in his hair. But he wasn't alive. You could see it in the way he held himself. Too still, like his bones were filled with ash instead of marrow. Cal didn't move. Neither did I. We watched our father like kids afraid of waking something dangerous. The pendant around his neck gleamed in the red light, swinging slightly with some rhythm we couldn't hear. I wanted to speak, to ask what this place was, what he had become, but I knew I wouldn't get an answer. Not with that mouth sewn shut. He raised a hand. Not toward us. Toward the circle. The symbols etched into the floor pulsed once, like a heartbeat. Then a low vibration filled the chamber, deep and slow, rattling the old stones under our feet. My ears rang with it. A name echoed through my head, not spoken, not heard, but known. I had no memory of it. Yet it scratched something buried deep inside, like a splinter of glass lodged beneath my thoughts. I reached out and grabbed Cal's arm. We shouldn't be here. But he was staring too hard, jaw tight, eyes glassy. He stepped forward, past the threshold of the stairs and onto the chamber floor. The moment his foot touched the stone, our father turned. His eyes locked onto Cal's. The black in them swirled, and his mouth, it began to tear open. The threads ripped one by one, slow and wet. His lips peeled back like bark from a dead tree. Blood, or something darker, poured down his chin. When the last stitch snapped, he spoke. "You broke the pact?" Cal stumbled backward. I caught him before he fell. Our father stepped forward. His bare feet made no sound. His voice was thick, like someone speaking through wet cloth. "You opened the door. You brought her back. You let it taste again." "Who?" I asked, though I already felt the answer breathing behind us. He didn't respond. His mouth was closing again, not being shut, closing itself, the skin weaving together like muscle memory. Then he pointed toward the circle. Beneath the symbols, a shape stirred. It rose slowly, emerging from the glowing pit with the patience of something that had waited a long, long time. A figure, tall and thin, cloaked in shadow and smoke. No face. No limbs. Just a shape that twisted the light around it. It stepped over the circle's edge, and the temperature dropped like the air had been ripped from the room. Cal whispered, "It's not just in the house." And he was right. Whatever this thing was, it was the house. The rot in the walls. The voices in the attic. The knock at midnight. It had always been this. And now it was standing in front of us. Our father fell to his knees. Not from weakness, but reverence. He bowed his head and spoke with a torn mouth. "It remembers." The figure turned. Not physically. It shifted. And it saw us. I felt it like ice water down my spine, like ants in my skull. It looked at me with nothing, with absence. And I understood. This thing didn't want blood. It didn't want death. It wanted recognition. It fed on being seen, remembered, spoken about. Every time someone whispered about the red door, every time someone wrote it off as legend or madness, it grew stronger. It didn't need belief. It needed witnesses. Cal lifted the revolver and fired. The shot split the silence. The figure didn't flinch. The bullet hit it and disappeared. No sound. No impact. Gone. The figure glided forward, each step rippling the stone beneath it like water. It passed our father without touching him. He sighed and collapsed sideways, mouth open, eyes empty. The figure reached Cal. And it spoke, not with words, with visions. Flashes of the first red door. Of Mom, humming while something inside her stretched its fingers into her mind. Of Cal, lost in the woods, whispering to something beneath the well. Of me, standing at the attic door years ago, hearing the knock and doing nothing. It fed on our inaction. It had waited for us to come back. And now it wanted to finish what it started. The room tilted. The walls pulsed. The red light turned darker, deepening into something almost black. My breath caught. My thoughts slipped sideways. But Cal moved. He stepped into the circle. And the figure stopped. It didn't attack. It bowed. Then it whispered. With a voice I felt more than heard, "Take your place." Cal didn't look back. He didn't ask for my help. He just stepped deeper into the circle, as if the words had been waiting inside him all along. The figure straightened and began to dissolve, wisps of its form unraveling upward like smoke returning to a cracked ceiling. The glow under our feet intensified, pulsing now with an urgency I couldn't ignore. I wanted to grab him, to pull him back out before the floor swallowed him, but my body wouldn't move. My muscles locked up. Not from fear, something else. Like the room had made a decision without me. Cal dropped to his knees, directly over the symbol at the center of the circle. Hands resting palm down on the stone. The second his skin touched it, the carvings lit like a fuse. Every symbol on the walls and floor ignited. Red light crawling outward from his fingers in jagged bolts. The light wasn't just illuminating, it was burning. The walls groaned. Dust rained from above, and beneath the vibrations I could hear it again. The lullaby, distant and hollow, now sung in reverse. The figure, the one that had spoken without words, was gone. But something else had risen in its place, not seen. Felt, a presence behind the walls, in the floor. Inside our blood, the room began to shake. The circle cracked in its center. But Cal didn't move. He was mumbling something now, words I couldn't understand, old syllables that stung the ears. My nose bled, my stomach twisted. And then I heard a sound I hadn't heard in years, our mother's scream. Not the twisted echo from the attic. Not the lullaby. Her scream. Real. Terrified. Ripped from her throat. It was coming from the floor. Cal looked up, eyes wild, but focused. "She's still in there," he said. "They didn't take her. They trapped her." The crack in the stone widened. The symbols turned white, hot, and something began to rise from below. Not a shape. A room. A room that didn't belong in this house or beneath this earth. It looked like a child's bedroom. Yellowed wallpaper, a small bed with a stuffed rabbit. Shelves filled with old toys. But everything moved. The walls breathed. The toys shifted on their own. And from the bed came a low moan. Cal tried to stand, but the circle wouldn't let him. He strained, gritting his teeth, muscles trembling. "Help me," he said. This time I moved. I stepped into the circle, and pain exploded behind my eyes. The moment my boot crossed the outer edge, something bit into my skull. Not physically. In memory. I was reliving every nightmare I'd ever had at once. The attic. The well. The woods. All wrapped together in one endless scream. But I didn't stop. I reached for Cal. He grabbed my hand. The floor split between us, and she rose. Mom, or something close. She floated upward from the crack, eyes empty, mouth wide with a silent scream. Her hair hung like vines, soaked and crawling. But she wasn't the thing from the attic. She wasn't stitched. She was trapped, held in place by 1,000 threads of light weaving through her arms, her chest, her throat. She looked at us, really looked, and her lips formed one word: run. Then the light snapped, and she fell, back into the dark. Cal screamed. He dove after her, but the circle slammed shut like a steel trap. The ground went dead. The light vanished. The room stopped shaking. I landed hard outside the ring, hands scraped, mouth full of blood. When I looked up, Cal was gone. The circle was solid stone again. No cracks, no light, no symbols. Just cold gray stone. I pounded the floor until my fists bled, screamed his name until my voice broke. But nothing came back. The room was still, and I was alone. Then, behind me, footsteps. Slow, bare, I turned. Standing in the archway was Mom. Not the stitched version, not the shadow, but her hair dry, eyes soft, skin whole. She smiled the way she used to when we came in late, and she pretended not to be angry. "Don't be scared," she said gently. But I was. I couldn't move. She took a step forward, her eyes shimmering. "He's not gone," she said. "He's just where I was." I backed away. "Where's that?" Her smile didn't change. "The part of the house that remembers." I shook my head. "I don't understand." She stopped at the edge of the circle. Kneeling, she ran her hand over the stone. "It only traps the ones who still want something," she said. "It only feeds on hope." She looked up at me. "But you gave up, didn't you?" I couldn't answer, because she was right. For years I pretended none of it happened. Ignored the knocks. Forgot the door. Let the house rot. She stood. "You still can save him," she whispered. "But you have to open all of them." My skin went cold. "How many?" She tilted her head and whispered, 40. I didn't answer her. Couldn't. My throat felt raw. My limbs too heavy to move. The circle at my feet was lifeless again, as if nothing had happened. No red glow, no symbols, no crack into whatever place had stolen Kyle. Only the faint scent of iron and smoke lingered, clinging to the back of my tongue. She stood there watching me, her arms slack at her sides, eyes so heartbreakingly normal it made me want to tear open my own skull just to make it stop. She was calm. Too calm. As if none of what happened in this house, not the screams, not the stitched mouth, not the hundreds of names carved into wood, had ever touched her. She said there were 40 doors. Not one. Not the attic. Not the cellar. 40. I backed away until I hit the wall, breath shaking out of me in ragged gasps. My hands scraped against the rough stone behind me, still warm from whatever ritual had burned beneath our feet. Mom didn't move. She just kept looking at me with that maddening softness, like I was 5 again and hiding after breaking a window. She took a step forward, and I saw it, a flicker beneath her left eye, a twitch, not human, not her. I focused on it, heart racing, and there it was again, a shudder beneath the skin. Like something pressing up from beneath a mask, she wasn't whole. Not yet. Maybe not ever again. I saw you die, I whispered. She nodded. You did? And Cal, is he alive? She tilted her head. He is where I was. Where is that? She walked toward the far wall. The stone faded as she approached it, melting into the shape of an old door, one I hadn't seen before. No handle. Just a round knoth hole where a knob should be. Around its edge were nails. Dozens, maybe hundreds. All hammered in halfway and bent to curve inward like teeth. The doors aren't all made of wood, she said, reaching out to touch it. Some are made of memories. Some are made of regret. The surface pulsed beneath her fingers. This one's yours. I shook my head, 1,000 thoughts spinning at once. I wanted to run, to tear out of the house and bury this place in cement and fire. But then I remembered Cal's face, the moment before he vanished, the silent pleas in his eyes. You said I can still save him. Mom smiled. If you remember what you chose to forget. The door creaked open. No hinges. No sound. Just absence. Inside was darkness, but not the void black of the red door. This was different, dusty, soft, familiar. And then I saw it, my childhood bedroom, frozen in time, blue walls, a cracked ceiling, my old bunk bed against the wall, the box fan humming in the window. But something was wrong. The posters on the wall were smeared, faces warped into screaming masks. My stuffed animals sat in a pile in the corner, all turned inward like they were hiding from something in the room. I stepped in. The air changed. Warm and humid, like summer after rain. My shoes stuck slightly to the floor, which was soft and spongy, like walking on damp carpet that never dried. I approached the bed. My old pillow was still there, faded with sweat stains, a familiar shape indented in the middle. Then I heard it, breathing, soft, wet. From beneath the bed, I froze. It wasn't the breath of a sleeper. It was the kind of breath that waits, the kind that knows you're about to lean down, and it's ready. My skin crawled. I knelt slowly, heart banging in my ears. I lifted the sheet. Under the bed was another me, younger, 7, maybe 8, eyes wide, mouth stitched. He stared at me, not moving, not blinking. Then he opened his mouth, not with muscle, but as if the thread itself split under pressure. And he whispered, "You let her in." I stumbled back, hitting the dresser. It shook and a drawer fell open, spilling papers. I grabbed one without thinking. It was a drawing, crayons, sloppy, a red door, a figure standing beside it. My mother, smiling. I dropped it and turned back to the bed. But the boy was gone. The room was different now, older. The walls were cracked deeper, the ceiling sagged. Mold had crept over the fan blades. The air turned bitter, bitter like cold coins in your mouth. And behind me, I heard a knock. 3 slow taps. I turned. The bedroom door was closed. Another knock, then the door handle turned. I ran. Through the door. Back into the stone hallway. The door slammed behind me, and the wall sealed over it like wet cement. My mother was gone. I was alone. I stared at the stone until my breath returned. The hallway ahead was different now, twisting into a new shape. More doors appeared, some small, some towering. One with a doorknob made of teeth. Another shaped like a coffin lid. Each one seemed to hum with something buried. And I realized, each one is a memory I've refused to face. Each one is mine, and somewhere inside them is Cal. Somewhere inside them is the truth. The walls whispered as I walked. You let her in. Now let us out. The hallway stretched longer than it should have. The more I walked, the more it bent in on itself. Angles that didn't obey geometry, corners that looped back, a ceiling that pulsed slightly, like something was breathing above it. I didn't question it. Not anymore. The house had rules, but none that made sense in daylight. It was no longer a structure built by men. It was something old, something patient, and it had been waiting for me to return. My hand brushed the stone wall. Rough and warm like skin under sunburn, I kept my eyes forward. The first door I reached was waist high, built into the base of the wall like a dumbwaiter. It had no knob, just a single rope tied in a noose where the handle should be. As I pulled it open, a gust of warm, faded air pushed out, thick with mildew and copper. Inside was a narrow passage, lined with insulation and old, splintered beams, just big enough to crawl through. I hesitated, then dropped to my knees and began crawling. The passage scraped my shoulders and tore my shirt. My hands pressed into decades of dust and dead insects. I moved forward on instinct, every nerve screaming that this was wrong. The deeper I went, the more the air changed, heavier, damp with something deeper than rot. I stopped when I saw the light ahead, flickering, orange, like fire, and the smell changed. Not just mildew now. Cooking meat. I pushed forward, heart hammering, until the tunnel opened into a hidden crawl space beneath what I realized was the old kitchen. I remembered the room above. It had burned when I was 12. They said it was faulty wiring, but I'd always suspected otherwise. My legs dangled from the tunnel as I peered down. There was a man hunched over a small campfire built atop a dirt patch. He was roasting something. Thin arms, charred fingers, a child's limbs. My breath caught. He didn't notice me at first. He was humming. Low, familiar, the same lullaby from the attic. I tried to back up, but my foot slipped and the tunnel groaned. The man looked up and smiled. His face was covered in soot. His eyes were burned out holes, and his lips were sewn just like the others, but he still smiled. Somehow, the edges of his mouth had been carved wider to make room. When he stood, I realized his legs were bound in rusted wire, stitched to his knees. He stumbled forward with each step like a puppet yanked on the wrong strings. Hungry, he rasped. I crawled backward, but he was faster. He dropped to all fours and crawled after me, scraping his face against the beams with no care for pain. His mouth opened in a series of dry pops as the thread stretched and split. Behind him, the fire roared brighter, revealing bones. Dozens, tiny ones. Children. I kicked at his face, and my boot struck something soft. He howled, more animal than man, and I used the moment to pull myself backward into the passage. He lunged, grabbing my ankle. His fingers burned against my skin. I reached for anything, rock, wood, anything to fight, and my hand landed on a rusted pipe. I swung hard, and it broke his grip. He screamed again and fell back into the firelight. I didn't stop. I crawled until my elbows bled, until the tunnel tilted upward, until I burst through a grate and rolled into another room. I lay there, coughing up dust, sweat pouring down my back. The grate behind me slammed shut on its own. I didn't get up for several minutes. My legs trembled. My ankle throbbed where he'd grabbed me. I pulled up my pant leg. There were blisters there. Burns. This house doesn't let go. It marks you. I stood up slowly, forcing my breath into something even. The room I'd entered was lined with mirrors. Dozens of them. Tall, warped, some cracked, others perfect. But none of them showed my reflection. Every single one showed a different version of me. In one, I was screaming. In another, I was bald, veins bulging. In another still, I wore my father's face, stitching my mouth with fishing wire. The reflections didn't copy me. They moved independently. Then one by one, they all turned, every version of me, slowly pivoting to look off to their right, into the corner of their mirrored world. And in that corner, every reflection had the same thing. A red door. I turned in my world. Nothing was there. Just wall. I looked back. The mirrors were empty. Just dust and glass now. No me, no doors. Only my real reflection remained. And I looked tired. I looked older. And behind me in the mirror I saw her. Mom. Staring. But when I turned around, the room was empty. I was losing time. Losing sense. I walked forward until another door appeared. It wasn't red. It was black, heavy, no handle again, just a single, long vertical slit in the center, like the kind you'd find in an asylum door. As I approached, something moved behind it. And not shadows, eyes, watching. I leaned in, and it whispered, "You remember me now, don't you?" My mouth went dry, because I did. I remembered the man from my dreams. The one under the house. The one who whispered in Cal's ear when we were kids. The one we blamed on nightmares and sleep paralysis. He was real. He'd always been real. And I had called him once. I had opened the red door when I was 6, and he had never left. The door didn't open. It peeled. The edges flaked like burnt paper curling in on itself. Dissolving into ash that didn't float down, it rose. Behind it, not a room, but a memory. Not a projection. A full place, alive and moving, waiting to be stepped into like stepping into wet concrete. My legs fought me, but the house had other plans. One moment I was staring through the slit, the next I was inside, standing barefoot in cold mud, with fog swirling just above the ground. I knew this place. I hated that I knew it. I was in the woods behind the house. Only it wasn't the woods as they were. It was the woods as they remembered me. There was no sky overhead, only blackness stitched with veins of red. The trees bent inward like ribs. The bark pulsed with moisture, and between the trunks I could hear them whispering. My name, over and over, sometimes as a chant, sometimes a plea, sometimes in my mother's voice, sometimes Cal's. I walked forward because there was nothing else to do. The mud sucked at my feet, warm and foul, like blood left to spoil in a shallow grave. The further I went, the more I remembered. Things I had buried, things I had chosen to forget. When I was 10, I ran away from home for one night. Told my parents I was sleeping over at a friend's, but I snuck into these woods. I had packed a backpack with snacks, a flashlight, and the note. The one I found under my pillow. Written in jagged letters I didn't recognize. Come to the well if you want her back. I didn't know what it meant, only that it sounded important and dangerous. I had felt the pull even then. I reached the well at dusk and stared into it for hours. It had no bottom, just a hollow sound that bent the air if you listened long enough. That night, something called to me from the dark, and I answered. Now, standing again at that same well, it looked different. Wider, deeper, hungrier. The stones were slick with black moss. Symbols I couldn't read had been carved along the rim, still wet with ink or blood or both. And above it, perched on the lip like a gargoyle, was the man I had forgotten. He wasn't tall. He wasn't monstrous. He wasn't even loud, he just was. His skin hung loose over his bones, stitched at the joints like a taxidermy gone wrong. His head was wrapped in a burlap sack. But I could see the movement underneath, like his skull was crawling. You called me, he said, voice like knives dragged across gravel. I said nothing. You don't remember what you gave, do you? He asked, hopping down from the well with the slow grace of a marionette. You just wanted her back. But everything has weight, even hope. I took a step back, but the trees closed behind me. Their roots lifted from the ground, knitting together until they formed a wall. The path out was gone. She never died in that fire, he said. You traded her. Part of her. The part that made her scream when she saw what was in the attic. I shook my head. You're lying. No, he said, crouching low. I don't need to lie. I only collect. He lifted a hand and I saw it. My mother's locket. The one she wore every day since I was born. I hadn't seen it in years. He opened it slowly, like a child showing off a broken toy. Inside wasn't a photo. It was an eye. Blinking. Bloodshot. Familiar. I fell to my knees. You want her whole? He asked. Then find the rest. The locket snapped shut. You left pieces all over this house, he hissed. In the drawers. In the attic. Under the floorboards. In the mouths of the ones you buried in your mind. Why? I croaked. Because you were a scared little boy, he whispered. And scared little boys hide things. Even the truth. The trees behind him split. A path opened. Not inviting, not safe, but open. He stepped aside and gestured. Door 13 is waiting. I stood, legs shaking, and walked past him. He didn't follow. Just laughed. It sounded like a bone snapping underwater. The woods fell away as I crossed the threshold. The air turned dry. My clothes were clean again. My feet no longer bare. I was standing in the hallway once more. Only now the lights above flickered violently like a warning. The doors had changed again, and one was glowing. Door 13. Painted a dull gray. Covered in children's drawings scratched into the surface. Stick figures with X for eyes, houses on fire, a car crash, a mother holding a child with no face. I touched the doorknob. It burned, not hot, cold. It seared into my palm like dry ice, and when I pulled my hand back, a patch of skin came with it. But the door creaked open anyway. Inside was a living room. Ours. Exactly as it was the night of the fire. The TV still flickering with static. Mom sitting on the couch, hair soaked, eyes black. She turned her head slowly, smiling too wide. "I made popcorn," she said, and I remembered. I hadn't run away the night of the fire. I had locked the door. The sound of the door closing behind me was soft, almost polite, but it might as well have been a gunshot. I was in, no going back, not without seeing it through. The living room was warm, too warm, the air thick like syrup, and everything looked exactly as it had the night the fire took our house. The ugly beige carpet. The old television with its warped screen flashing static. The coffee table with one broken leg propped up by an old phone book. Even the faint scent of vanilla from the candle Mom always lit when she was nervous. It was all there. All of it except the passage of time. Nothing had changed. Except me. She sat on the couch like she always did, knees tucked under her, an afghan draped across her lap. But her hair was wet, the strands clinging to her face and shoulders. Her eyes were wrong, wide black, the white swallowed by a darkness that moved like oil. She smiled too wide when she saw me and patted the cushion beside her. "Sit," she said. "You've been out in the cold too long." I didn't move. Her smile flickered. "I made popcorn," she said again, like it was a magic phrase meant to anchor us both in some version of reality where things were still okay. I looked at the coffee table. There was a bowl there, and yes, it was popcorn. But it was damp, soggy, yellow with something I didn't want to name. One of the kernels twitched. I looked at her, heart pounding. "Why am I here?" Her head tilted. "You came to watch the movie." The TV sputtered, and for a moment, the static resolved into a moving picture, grainy, black and white. It was footage of me, young, maybe 5, standing in the hallway, holding a red crayon. Behind me, the wallpaper peeled in strips, revealing something pulsing underneath, like muscle. In the video, I turned toward the camera and smiled. The me in the footage was missing one eye. I took a step back. Mom stood up. The Afghan fell away, revealing her legs, burned black from the knees down, skin fused to fabric, to bone. Her arms were normal. Her face, almost beautiful in the way memories polish the past. But her lower half had been destroyed, and she didn't seem to notice. "You let the smoke in," she said, stepping toward me. "You opened the chimney and whispered the rhyme, just like he told you to." "I was a kid," I said. I didn't know what I was saying. Her smile vanished. "But you knew enough to lock the door." A fresh wave of heat rolled through the room, and the ceiling blackened. Paint bubbled. I turned and tried the door behind me. It was gone. No handle, no seams, just wall. "Do you remember what you said?" she asked, voice low now. "No, I lied." She stepped closer. "You do." I shook my head. "You said, take her." "Not me." Something inside me cracked. I staggered back and felt the carpet melt beneath my feet. My shoes sank slightly, and the floor let off a hiss. The couch ignited behind her in complete silence. No roar, no crackle, just flame. She didn't turn to look. She just kept walking forward, burned legs dragging, mouth quivering into something more grotesque than a smile. "Do you know what he said back?" she asked. I couldn't speak. She leaned in. He said, "Only if he remembers." She reached out to touch my cheek, and I ran. I barreled past her, through the wall itself, not knowing where I was going. only that I had to move. The house let me through. The wall split open just long enough to let my body pass, and I tumbled into the hallway gasping for breath. The door behind me resealed with a sucking sound. My skin was damp, my lungs ached, and my palm still bore the blister from the frozen knob. Down the hall, I heard a sound. A voice. It was Cal, screaming. I didn't think. I ran. The hallway stretched and bent, but I kept running. My foot caught something and I hit the ground hard, scraping my palms. I turned to look. A doll. One of the ones from the attic. Its eyes had been stitched shut. A message was sewn across its stomach. You locked the wrong door. I stood up and kept running. Door after door passed me, each marked differently. Some had names scratched into the wood. Others had dates. One had my full name carved in backward. I stopped at a door with no markings. Nothing at all. It felt dead, heavy. I touched the wood. It was warm. And then I heard it, Cal's voice again, clearer this time. Don't open it? Not that one? I stumbled back, but the door opened on its own. No hinges this time, just space ripping. The inside was pitch black, but I smelled something. Leather, wet leaves, and something else. The perfume Mom used to wear on Sundays. A hand reached out from the dark. Not clawed, not stitched, just a hand. Pale, shaking. A voice followed, a child's voice. Mine. Please, it whispered. You forgot me. And I remembered. Not just one memory, but dozens. I remembered a night when I hid in the closet, listening to someone walk up and down the hallway outside, scratching the walls with something sharp. I remembered covering my ears and whispering the rhyme that Cal had found. The one scrawled in red ink on a napkin. I remembered saying it under my breath, over and over, like a prayer. If the knock is soft and slow, open once, but never go. If the knock is loud and fast, open twice, and breathe your last. And I remembered the knock that came after. 3 sharp raps, like nails on wood. I opened the door. But I didn't look. I closed my eyes. And take her, not me. And the door stayed open. The moment the door swallowed my voice, everything went silent. Not just quiet, silent. No air, no echo, no heartbeat. My breath moved but made no sound. The door behind me didn't close with a click or creak. It just vanished, like the wall forgot there had ever been a door. I stood in that dead space, disoriented, my senses stripped one by one. My ears rang from the absence of sound. I waved my hand in front of my face. No wind, no rustle. My feet moved across the floor, but I heard nothing. I stomped. Nothing. I screamed. I felt it in my throat, but the room ate every ounce of it. And that's when I knew this wasn't just some trick of architecture. This room had been built to keep secrets quiet. The walls were lined with strange padding, not soft like foam, but tight, dense, like skin stretched too thin. Something moved beneath it, slow ripples, as if the walls were listening. There were no windows, no lights, yet I could see everything. A chair in the center of the room, an old reel projector facing a blank wall, and on the chair, an object I hadn't seen since I was a child. A tape recorder. It was red plastic, scuffed, missing a button. I walked over to it slowly, every step like trudging through syrup. I reached down, pressed, play, and waited. The cassette inside spun, but I heard nothing. Then the static began, not loud, not sharp, just there. Steady, consistent, and underneath it, a voice. But not now, me younger, maybe 6. I pressed my ear close. I didn't mean to. I thought it was a game. The tape popped and hissed. She screamed, but I locked it anyway. He told me to. The man in the red room. My hands trembled. I think I broke her. I think she's still inside the wall. The tape stopped. The reel reversed. Started again. This time the voice was deeper, older. Ow. You said you wouldn't tell. You promised. But now she's mad. She scratched her name into the door, and it won't come off. I stared at the wall ahead of the projector. It flickered, and suddenly it was playing footage, home video style. Me and Cal in the basement laughing. playing with walkie-talkies. But behind us, in the corner near the fuse box, something moved, a shape, small, curled, watching. As the video played, the shape grew larger, stood up, walked toward us. But neither of us noticed. The footage cut to black. Then the film resumed. This time, the basement was empty. The shape was in the center of the frame now. It had no face, no mouth, just a circle drawn where features should have been. And then I understood. That wasn't a figure at all. It was a door in the shape of a person. And I had opened it, years ago, not by turning a knob, but by saying yes. A sound cracked the air. The first sound in that room, not from the tape, not from the film, from behind me. 3 sharp knocks. I turned. A door had appeared, but it wasn't attached to a frame. It just hovered, suspended in the air by chains hooked to the ceiling. The knocks came again, slower this time. I stepped forward and reached out, but my hand passed through it like fog, not solid, not real. But then a hand pressed against the other side, from inside the door, small, pale, and then a face. Her face. My sister, Sarah. I hadn't thought about her in years. Not since the accident. That's what we called it. That's what the whole town called it. But it wasn't an accident. She'd gone missing during the fire. They never found her body. Everyone assumed she'd run off. A tragedy. But here she was, on the other side of the floating door. Mouth open in a scream I couldn't hear. I mouthed her name. She slammed her palm against the invisible barrier. Behind her something moved. Fast, sharp. It dragged her back into the dark. I screamed, finally hearing my voice again, but it echoed wrong, too loud, too late, as if the room was playing it back from somewhere else. The door shattered, not into wood or glass, but light, bright and violent. It seared my eyes and forced me to turn away. When I looked back, the room was empty again. The projector had melted. The tape recorder was gone. The walls pulsed slower now, like whatever fed on sound had gone back to sleep. Then I noticed something carved into the chair where the recorder had been. 4 words, etched deep. She never forgave you. I backed out of the room. The door behind me hadn't disappeared this time. It waited. It wanted me to leave. I didn't run. I walked. Because now, I understood something I hadn't before. The house wasn't just showing me horrors. It was cataloging them, archiving them. Every door I opened let something back out, and I was only halfway through. As I stepped into the hallway, I felt something wet on my hands. Blood. It seeped from my fingernails, from the skin of my palms, from under my tongue. I looked up. The next door was waiting. Red. Not like the others. This one pulsed, like it had a heartbeat. I closed my eyes and knocked once. The knock echoed through the hallway. Hollow and deliberate, like the slow beating of a distant drum. I waited, breath caught in my chest, eyes fixed on the red door that pulsed faintly like a living thing. The silence stretched and thickened until it felt like I was drowning in it, every second dragging longer than the last. Then the door creaked, slowly, agonizingly, as if reluctant to reveal what lay behind it. A chill washed over me, sharp and cold, crawling up my spine and settling in the pit of my stomach. I reached out with trembling fingers and grasped the handle, which was icy against my skin. Yet beneath the cold, I felt something else. Something like a faint heartbeat, pulsing in sync with the door itself. With a deep breath, I turned the knob. The door swung open silently, revealing a dimly lit room that seemed to stretch infinitely into darkness. Shadows twisted and danced at the edges of my vision, and the air was thick with a scent I couldn't place. Something both sweet and rotten, like decaying flowers buried beneath fresh soil. My footsteps echoed softly as I stepped inside, each one swallowed almost immediately by the darkness. Ahead, a figure stood waiting. Not a shadow or a flicker, but solid, real, too real. It was me, or rather, a version of me, worn and hollowed by years of fear and regret. His eyes were sunken, reflecting an ocean of sorrow, and his mouth twisted into a bitter smile that spoke of secrets I'd long tried to bury. He held out a hand, inviting, pleading. "You came back," he whispered. "You opened the door. Now you must remember." I swallowed hard, the weight of 1,000 forgotten memories pressing down on my mind. The room around me seemed to pulse in response, breathing with a life of its own. The walls shifted subtly, revealing glimpses of moments long past, laughter, screams, whispered prayers, and broken promises, all tangled together like threads in a frayed tapestry. The figure stepped closer, eyes locking onto mine with a piercing intensity. "You left pieces of yourself behind," he said, voice echoing in the darkness. "Pieces that built this house, this prison. To free them, you must face every shadow you hid away." I nodded, though fear gripped me like iron chains. This was no longer just a journey through a haunted house. It was a reckoning with myself. And the red door closed softly behind me, sealing my fate. I didn't move at first. The other me, older, thinner, his skin drawn tight over hollow cheeks, kept his hand outstretched, patient and expectant, as if he had all the time in the world. The red door behind me faded from sight, swallowed by a darkness that pressed in from every side. The only light came from a dull, sourceless glow overhead, painting our faces with a sickly pallor. Shadows shifted along the floor in patterns that felt deliberate, as if the room itself was thinking, remembering. The air was heavy with loss. He spoke again, voice softer now, the echo of my own childhood shame. "You can't leave until you take them back." I stared at him, searching for anything that separated us, anything to prove he wasn't me. But every detail was perfect. The scar above his eyebrow, the uneven slant of his shoulders, the haunted look that had followed me for years. He smiled, but it wasn't kind. It was resigned. "Every time you ran," he said, "you left someone behind. Every time you locked a door, you trapped a piece of yourself with them." I opened my mouth to protest, but the room shifted around me. Walls expanding outward to reveal dozens of alcoves, each lit by a single flickering candle. In every alcove, a face waited. Some I recognized. Cal as a boy, Mom with tears frozen on her cheeks, Dad's jaw set in grim silence, Sarah's eyes round and pleading. Others were strangers, blurs of old nightmares and unfinished memories. Every face watched, unmoving, waiting for me to claim them. "You must forgive yourself," my double whispered. "All of them, or none. The house will not let you pass unfinished." The alcoves deepened, stretching further into the gloom, and I saw moments play out inside them. A dozen childhood betrayals, arguments I'd never apologized for, broken promises and selfish prayers. Each one was a room, a memory, a door I had closed and never looked back. The me in the center moved closer, lowering his hand but never breaking eye contact. "You have to choose, Nathan. Face what you left. Open what you locked." My throat tightened. "And if I can't?" He smiled, mournful and sure. "Then the house will remember for you. And you will stay here, with the rest of us." A sound filled the room, a low, rhythmic knocking, echoing through every alcove. The candles flickered in time with the noise, and the faces leaned forward, mouths opening in silent screams. I forced myself to take a step, then another, toward the nearest alcove. Cal, 8 years old, clutching a stuffed animal, eyes wet with betrayal. The memory came back in a rush, leaving him behind in the dark. Too scared to wait for him to catch up, the sound of him crying as I ran on without him. I knelt in front of the alcove. "I'm sorry," I whispered. His face softened. The candle's flame grew. One by one, I moved through the alcoves, apologizing, remembering, releasing. Each act burned, tore at old wounds, but each candle that brightened pushed the darkness back, if only a little. My double watched silently, approving, his face growing less severe with every forgiveness I offered. And when I finally returned to the center, the last candle flared, filling the room with blinding light. I was alone. No shadows. No red door. Just the echo of my own heartbeat steady and real. A new door appeared ahead, unmarked, plain, wood polished by countless hands. And I understood this was the way forward, if I had the courage to step through. I stood in the white silence, the aftermath of the light burning my vision into an afterimage that lingered behind my eyelids. The alcoves were gone. The shadows, the faces, even the echo of my double's sorrow had been swept away by the force of memory reclaimed. In their place, the plain wooden door waited, a humble, worn thing, no engravings, no paint, no threat. Just old wood, warm under my fingertips, familiar in a way that pulled at the deepest threads of childhood. The polished surface felt almost gentle, as if inviting me to step forward at last, unburdened. For a moment, I hesitated. Was this truly the final passage? Or just another trick? Another layer in the house's endless spiral? The quiet pressed in, thick as wool, broken only by the sound of my breathing and the subtle, living pulse I could feel humming through the floorboards. I pressed my palm flat against the door and waited, listening for some last sign of warning or welcome. None came. With one slow breath, I turned the handle. The door swung open easily. No resistance, no groan of old hinges, revealing a staircase descending into a golden glow. It wasn't the red or the sickly light of earlier halls. This was softer, warmer, almost hopeful. I stepped through and began to descend, the stairs creaking beneath me, each footfall echoing in a way that felt real, grounded. The air tasted like dust and honey. The staircase ended in a room I'd never seen, yet somehow always known. Sunlight filtered in through a high, grimy window, catching dust motes that spun and danced in the air. The walls were lined with old books, faded toys, relics of a lost era, my childhood things, preserved like offerings. In the middle stood a wooden table. On it, a single object, the family photo from before everything fractured, before the red door and the loss and the silence. We were all there. Mom, Dad, Sarah, Cal, and me, smiling, unbroken, impossible. My knees threatened to buckle. I reached for the photo, hands shaking, and as I did, I felt the floor beneath me vibrate, a pulse, like a heart beating under the house. The walls shimmered, and for a split second, I saw everyone who'd ever been trapped here. The faces from the alcoves, Cal, Sarah, even the strangers whose names I'd never learned, all watching with quiet expectation. I closed my eyes and pressed the photo to my chest. The house spoke, not in words, but in a wave of memory and grief that rolled through me, dredging up every secret I'd locked away. I let it come. I didn't turn away, didn't hide. I faced every buried fear, every hurt and broken promise. The tears came, fierce and hot, and with them a release I'd never known. When I opened my eyes, the room had changed. Sunlight poured in from every window. The dust had cleared. I heard birdsong, real, bright, outside the house for the first time in what felt like centuries. But the door behind me was gone. There was only forward now. At the far end of the sunlit room, another door waited, white, bright, unblemished. I knew, with a certainty that hurt, that this was the last, the way out, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I took a deep breath and let the warmth of the sunlight fill me. For a moment, it felt like peace, true, untarnished peace. The kind I'd thought was lost long before the house first whispered, before the first door, before I learned how memory could rot. The white door at the far end of the room gleamed in the afternoon light, radiant and clean, a final threshold that needed no markings, no riddles, no shadow. I moved toward it slowly, pausing only once to look back at the photo in my hand. Our family, frozen in a happiness that was once real and might be again, even if only in memory. As I reached the white door, I noticed something. For the first time. There was no handle, no lock, just the bare plane of wood, smooth and cool under my palm. The surface shivered faintly at my touch, not in fear, but in anticipation, as if waiting for me to decide. I pressed my forehead to the door, closing my eyes, letting the glow settle inside me. And then I spoke, not to the house, but to everyone I'd left behind. Cal, Sarah, Mom and Dad, all the versions of me that had been lost in the dark, all the voices that had screamed through the walls, the hands that had reached for rescue and found only memory. I spoke their names. I told them I remembered, that I forgave them and myself, that I was ready to let go. The door shuddered, once, then twice. A pulse, like the echo of a heartbeat, rippled through the floor. The light in the room grew stronger, washing over every corner, peeling away the last hints of dust, shadow, and rot. The voices that had haunted the house softened, merging into a hush, not quite silence but not agony either. Just the quiet after a long, terrible storm. I stepped forward and the door opened for me. Not swinging on hinges, but dissolving, the white spreading until there was nothing left but light. I crossed the threshold. For an instant, I felt myself falling. Not down, but up, lifted through layers of air that smelled of grass and rain, the world above and below shimmering with memory and promise. And then I was outside, standing in the yard, the old house behind me. Smaller now, just wood and brick and moss, windows catching sunlight, the roofline gentle and unthreatening. The air was sweet, clean. No trace of smoke, no taste of blood, only the sound of wind in the tall grass and the distant laughter of children playing somewhere safe. Cal was there, sitting on the porch steps, looking up at the sky. He turned when he saw me, eyes clear. No shadows, no fear, just relief. I joined him in the sunlight. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The past was still there, but it didn't hurt anymore. The house behind us wasn't hungry. It wasn't watching. It was just a house. And we were finally free. We sat there on the porch, two brothers side by side, letting the sun touch our faces as if for the first time in years. Cal reached for my hand, a gesture so simple it nearly undid me. The wind in the tall grass brought scents of wildflowers and distant rain, the kind of sweetness that made me ache for all the days we'd lost inside. There was a softness to the world that hadn't existed before, a quiet promise that the worst was finally over, that all the doors inside the house were closed for good, or maybe just empty. No longer hungry, no longer waiting. Neither of us spoke for a long time. There was too much to say, and nothing that needed saying. I let my eyes travel over the yard. The trees, the gentle slant of light across the roof. In that silence, I realized something. The house, for all its cruelty and memory, had not only trapped us in its story. It had also given us back the parts of ourselves we thought were lost forever. The laughter in Cal's voice, the quiet steadiness in my chest, the warmth of our mother's hand in memory, the way Sarah's smile hovered at the edge of sunlight. A car passed down the road, engine humming like a song, and I barely noticed the way the world had filled back and around us. The mailbox at the drive was new, the flag upright and red. Birds settled in the sycamore, shaking dew from their wings. And when I looked over my shoulder, the house was just a house. Faded, small, a little battered by weather, but no more dangerous than any other old place on a quiet street. Cal laughed, sudden and bright, as if he'd just remembered the punchline of a long, forgotten joke. I joined him, the sound bubbling up out of me like water breaking through rock. We both doubled over, not from pain but relief, until tears rolled down our cheeks, and we let them fall without shame. Later, as the sun slipped lower and the porch grew cool, I asked quietly, "Do you think it's really over?" Cal wiped his face and nodded. "I think so. Or at least, I think we get to decide now." That was all. That was enough. We sat until the shadows grew long and the crickets began their evening song, the house behind us fading into memory, the doors inside it finally. Mercifully. Still, the hours slipped by with a gentleness that felt foreign at first, like wearing shoes that almost fit but not quite. The longer we sat, the more I believed it. The nightmare had passed. The weight in my chest was gone, replaced by something light, untethered, almost fragile in its newness. Cal leaned back against the porch railing, eyes half closed, soaking up the simple rhythm of the world as it spun on without our suffering. The cicadas began their evening chorus, a wild and joyous sound. It seemed impossible that such music had ever been drowned out by screams, by knocking, by the voice of the house itself. We watched the sun sink behind the sycamores, painting everything in golden orange. A neighbor's dog barked far away. The wind sent the last of the petals spinning across the yard. I found myself memorizing it all. The creak of wood under our feet, the faint smell of smoke that was only from a distant grill, not from anything haunted or hungry. For the first time in a lifetime, there were no doors left to count. No secret rooms, no crawling shapes in the walls. Just the old house, settled and silent, and two brothers side by side in the dusk. When the first stars pricked through the sky, Cal spoke, voice soft as the wind. "What do you think comes next?" I shook my head, honest in a way I'd never managed before. "I don't know. I don't think it matters, as long as it isn't that." I nodded toward the house, and we both smiled. The easy kind you share with family when the worst is over and there's nothing left to fear. A distant laugh drifted from somewhere down the block. A family eating late on their porch. Someone telling a story, the gentle thud of a basketball against cracked pavement. It all felt like a world we'd been allowed back into. A world that had kept turning even while we'd been trapped behind its walls. I wondered if the doors would ever call to us again, if the memories would ever claw back out of the dark. But the thought didn't scare me anymore. I knew now that we had a choice. The doors only open if you answer. Night settled around us, thick and sweet, and I felt tired in a way that promised rest. Not escape, not forgetting, but true sleep. Cal stood, stretched, and together we went inside, into a house that was only a house, with rooms that were only rooms and dreams that, at last, would not follow us into morning. The quiet after survival is its own kind of ghost. We didn't realize it at first. How silence, too, could be haunted. The sun set and the house grew dim, the porch light clicking on with the usual mechanical sigh, and Cal and I drifted through the rooms, as if reacquainting ourselves with an old friend. The kitchen was smaller than I remembered, the countertop pitted from years of dropped pans and dull knives. The living room, once the site of a dozen ordinary arguments and 100 silent nights, now felt too open. I kept glancing at the corners, half expecting the shadows to sharpen, the walls to breathe. But the darkness stayed put, and the only thing stirring was dust. We made sandwiches, peanut butter and jelly, like we used to on summer nights when our parents worked late. Cal insisted on using too much jelly, the way he always had, grinning with the sticky confidence of someone who had been young once and was willing to try it again. I laughed. It felt real. We sat at the kitchen table, eating in companionable silence. Every few bites, I caught him glancing at the hallway. Quick, nervous, reflexive. Old habits, hard to break. I asked if he was all right, and he nodded, mouth full, eyes clear. But I could tell the answer was more complicated. It always would be. You don't escape the house by walking out. You escape by refusing to let it back in. After we finished, I wandered upstairs, trailing my fingers along the railings, listening to the gentle hush that had settled like a blessing over everything. The bedrooms were just bedrooms now, not portals to other nightmares. The attic door was shut. I tested it out of old superstition. Just a gentle push, enough to feel the resistance. The simple stubbornness of wood swollen with age. No whisper, no sigh, not even the memory of a breath. The place was utterly still. A single moth battered itself against the hallway bulb, casting a frantic shadow that disappeared with every turn. Cal joined me as I stood outside the door to our childhood room. We lingered there together, silent for a moment, letting the memory of what the room once was overlap with what it had become. A simple space, faded blue wallpaper, the twin beds stripped of their ancient blankets. I stepped inside first, half expecting the air to change, the temperature to plummet, but it was just a room. The moonlight through the window cast a pale rectangle across the floorboards, and I found myself staring at the spot where the red door had once appeared in my dreams, in nightmares that were more real than anything I could put into words. There was nothing there now. No secret doors, no voices, just the grain of wood and the faint scent of laundry detergent. We lay down in our beds, like children again, like we were borrowing time from a world that had nearly forgotten us. Cal talked quietly, voice almost too soft to hear, about the things he'd missed. Real food, warm showers, sunlight that didn't come filtered through dust and dread. I told him about the long years alone, the things I'd done to keep the memories at bay. The fights, the jobs, the endless drifting from apartment to apartment, always searching for a place that didn't echo with footsteps in the walls. It was strange how easily the conversation slipped into normalcy, how quickly we found a rhythm after so many years of chaos. But even as I drifted toward sleep, I knew the house still remembered. The air had changed, subtly, more alive somehow. Not threatening, not hungry, but attentive. It felt as if, in our refusal to be afraid, we had awakened a kind of curiosity in the old place. I told myself it was only nerves, that after so much horror, even silence could sound like a threat. But deep down, I knew better. Places like this don't forget, not completely. I woke in the middle of the night to a sound I couldn't place at first. My heart leapt, every muscle tensing, expecting the old terrors. The knock, the lullaby, the scraping behind the walls. But it was none of those things. It was the sound of rain, soft and steady, drumming against the roof, sliding down the windows in gentle streams. The house creaked with the weather, old wood settling, and I lay there listening, letting each drop remind me that this was real. This was now, and the house was only a house. But then I heard something else. Faint, almost lost beneath the rain. A voice, low and warm, humming a tune I hadn't heard since childhood. I sat up, heart pounding, and strained to listen. It was coming from downstairs, from the kitchen. For a moment, I nearly convinced myself it was Mom, that she'd slipped back into the world on a wave of music and water. But I knew better. I rose quietly, careful not to wake Cal, and padded down the stairs. The kitchen was empty. The light over the sink glowed softly, and the window was fogged with condensation. The rain fell harder now, a constant hush that blurred the world outside. I checked every corner, opened the pantry, even looked behind the fridge. Nothing. I returned to the table, my palm pressed flat against the old wood, remembering the nights we'd sat here together, the way laughter once filled the space between us. As I turned to go back upstairs, I heard the humming again. Closer this time, right behind me. I spun, heart in my throat. But there was no one there, only the hush of the rain and the sound of my own breath. I closed my eyes, focused on the memory, the exact notes of the lullaby. It was the same one Mom used to sing, the one that had turned sour in the mouth of the house, the one that had haunted the attic and the well. But here now, it was different, softer. Not threatening, but sad. A farewell. I whispered, goodbye. Not sure who I was speaking to. The sound faded. The air in the kitchen shifted, and for the first time, I felt the house sigh, an exhale, tired and gentle, letting go of something it had held for too long. Back in bed, I watched the shadows shift across the ceiling, the patterns of rain reflected in every dark corner. Cal snored softly, one arm thrown over his eyes, peaceful in a way I hadn't seen since we were boys. I let the rain carry me back to sleep, into a darkness that was clean and empty, not haunted but healing. The next morning was bright, sunlight bursting through the windows with a confidence that felt almost defiant. I made coffee in the old pot, the one that had survived every disaster, every flood, every year of absence. Cal joined me, hair wild, eyes bright with the joy of another day earned, another day unburdened. We ate toast and eggs, arguing over the best way to scramble them, laughing until we cried. We made plans, small ones, unremarkable and beautiful. Fix the mailbox, paint the fence, go into town and buy groceries. Nothing grand, nothing heavy, just life, simple and possible. That afternoon, a neighbor came by with a pea, a gesture that would have seemed ridiculous in any other context. But here it felt like the final proof that we belonged to the world again. She didn't ask about the years we'd been gone, didn't mention the stories that must have grown in our absence. She just smiled, handed us the pie, and talked about her garden and the raccoons that kept raiding her tomatoes. When she left, Cal and I stood in the doorway, savoring the sweetness of her kindness, the warmth of her normalcy. Later, as the day faded and the sky painted itself in shades of lavender and rose, I wandered through the yard. The grass was thick, the wildflowers bold. I ran my hands over the rough bark of the sycamore, traced the initials Cal, and I had carved as children the mark of two boys who had once believed in monsters and miracles. I looked back at the house, its windows glowing with the light of home, and felt the last threads of fear slip away. Inside, Cal played guitar, badly, but with enthusiasm. His voice, once thin and wavering, was strong, filling the rooms with songs I hadn't heard in years. I joined in, off key and laughing, letting the music drown out the last ghosts. That night, as we locked the doors and turned off the lights, I felt the house settle around us, content. No more knocking, no more calls from the dark. Just two brothers, alive and free, resting in the rooms that remembered but did not haunt. And if sometimes the floor creaked a little too loud, or the wind carried a hint of old lullabies, we let it pass. We knew what it meant. The house was healing too. Every scar, every shadow, every memory was just a part of the story. And stories, like doors, are only dangerous if you forget how to close them. The rhythm of ordinary days settled over us with a gentle insistence, as if the house itself wanted to relearn the art of peace. For a while, that was enough. The routine stitched us back together. Morning coffee on the porch, afternoons spent repainting the fence or trimming the wild roses, evenings drifting into music or old stories that grew less haunted with each retelling. The outside world didn't ask questions, and we didn't volunteer answers. The neighbors waved, brought more pies, offered tools or seeds or jokes about the house that had finally woken up. We laughed along, grateful for their distance as much as their kindness. But it wasn't just the people who noticed the change. The land did too. Grass thickened. The garden thrived without effort. Birds returned to the eaves, filling the mornings with their chatter. Even the air smelled different, richer, sharper. The way it used to before lost soared everything sweet. At night, the crickets sang without any undertone of menace, and the wind seemed only to brush the old house, not to whisper secrets through the cracks. In every small way, life began again. Still, memory doesn't let go so easily. It lingered, quiet but persistent, surfacing in dreams or in the way Cal and I paused sometimes at thresholds, waiting for a knock that never came. Some nights, I woke to the sound of footsteps, only my own, echoing off bare floors as I checked windows, touched doorknobs, made sure the attic hatch was still closed. Each time, I found nothing but the gentle hush of a house at rest. The more I trusted it, the easier it was to believe this peace was real. Days passed, then weeks. I picked up odd jobs in town, learning to speak with people again, to take up space in the world. Cal helped at the nursery, planting new rows of saplings, hands always dirty, smile always bright. We met for lunch, made friends, let our names settle back into the rhythm of the town's gossip and goodwill. If anyone noticed how closely we watched the seasons, how careful we were to keep the house warm and the lights burning, no one said a word. One Saturday as late summer turned the trees gold and the sky stretched cloudless for days, Cal found me in the yard, kneeling by the old sycamore. He handed me a faded photograph, one I hadn't seen in years. Our whole family, arms around each other. Laughter caught in the instant before the shutter clicked. For a moment, the world held its breath. I pressed the photo to my chest, feeling the achy of old wounds, the healing of newer ones. Do you ever think about going back? Cal asked quietly, eyes on the house. I shook my head, more sure than I'd ever been. No, not in the old way. But maybe I think about remembering. On purpose, not by accident. Keeping the stories so they don't turn on us again. He nodded. I like that. We get to choose how it ends now. That evening, as dusk bled slowly into the fields and the first stars struggled through the haze, we sat together on the porch, sharing stories, not the haunted kind, but the ones that made us laugh, made us whole. For the first time, we talked about the years in the dark, the things we saw, the voices we heard. It wasn't easy, and sometimes the words stuck or faltered, but each confession lightened the air, as if the house itself listened and approved. A soft wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and the promise of autumn. I looked up at the windows, half expecting a face, a shadow, some last remnant of the old hunger. But there was nothing, just light spilling from within, golden and warm, banishing even the memory of the red door. Later, I wandered through the house, room by room, leaving every door open. The bedroom smelled of fresh paint and linen. The kitchen of bread and coffee. The attic hatch stuck a little, but when I pressed it, only a faint sigh escaped. Just dust settling. No voices, no threat. On my way back downstairs, I paused at the landing, letting my hand rest on the banister. I closed my eyes and listened, reaching out for the old fear, the old tension. It was gone. Not forgotten. Never that, but dissolved, diluted by so many days of simple, stubborn living. In the morning, sunlight woke me before the alarm. Cal was already up, frying eggs, singing along to a song on the radio, his voice tuneless, but joyous. I joined him, laughing, and we ate with the doors wide open, unafraid of what might be waiting on the other side. And in that ordinary light, I understood what the house had taught us: even the deepest darkness ends. If you keep walking forward, if you keep letting the light in, there would always be shadows in the corners. That was the nature of things built from memory and loss. But as long as we remembered to open the doors, as long as we let ourselves live in the light, the house would remain only a house, and we would remain, finally, quietly, joyfully, ourselves. Autumn fell heavy in gold, the kind of season that makes you notice every detail, the way sunlight streams through old glass, the sound of brittle leaves underfoot, the sharp, living scent of the world moving forward. The old house settled deeper into itself, as if accepting our peace, breathing out years of stale grief. Days drifted by, unremarkable and precious. There were chores, fixing the gutters, patching the porch, stacking wood for winter. Cal took to making soups that simmered all afternoon, filling every room with warmth and something like hope. I found comfort in these repetitions, in the way the house echoed with normal life, as if every meal, every laugh, every quiet night was another nail in the coffin of what once haunted us. Yet even in the best light, memory is restless. Some mornings I caught myself staring too long at the hallway mirror, waiting for it to show me a version of myself I'd left behind. On cloudy afternoons, the silence grew so deep, I thought I heard old voices rise up from the floorboards. Faint, unfinished, not menacing but longing, as if the house wanted to be remembered, wanted us to acknowledge what we'd survived. I learned not to flinch. Instead, I talked to the house sometimes, a quiet "thank you," or a "not today," whispered as I passed the attic door. Maybe I believed it could hear me. Maybe that was the point. Neighbors continued to come by. The children were curious about us, about the old house with the two brothers who beat the curse. Some days, I'd find tiny bouquets of wildflowers left on the porch. little tributes to the story that must have grown about us while we were missing. Sometimes I wondered how the town explained our absence. How legends formed when truth was stranger than fiction, when pain had to be softened for bedtime stories. But I didn't mind. I let the rumors pass through me. Just more weather, just another part of the landscape. Cal started teaching music to the local kids in the parlor. The old piano, long neglected, found new life under clumsy hands and eager voices. The house seemed to welcome the noise, the stampede of small feet, the laughter that trailed into every room. There were days I felt something loosen inside the walls, a shifting, an uncoiling. Maybe the place was healing too. Maybe houses, like people, are grateful when the darkness finally lets up and the living come back home. One night, when the wind rattled the windows and the rain hammered the roof, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote a letter to myself. I wrote about the doors, about the long corridor of fear and guilt and secrets. I wrote about Cal, about Sarah, about Mom's lullaby and Dad's quiet strength, about every face that waited in candlelit alcoves. I didn't ask for forgiveness, I simply remembered. When I finished, I folded the letter and tucked it inside a book, an offering, a promise that the story would not be lost again. The next morning, I found Cal in the garden, standing still as the sunlight spilled over the fence. He was staring at the sky, face peaceful. When he noticed me, he smiled, not with relief or survival, but with anticipation. "I had a dream last night," he said, voice steady. I walked through every door in the house, but this time, none of them were locked. I nodded, feeling something inside me settle. The last pebble in a pile. "Maybe it's finally finished," I said. He looked back at the house, eyes bright with the simple, stubborn hope that kept us alive. "No. I think we just get to write the rest ourselves." We went inside together, side by side, closing the door gently behind us. In the hush that followed, I realized the house had always been unfinished, always waiting for someone to choose what happened next. That's the truth no ghost story ever tells. The ending is just another beginning, waiting for someone brave, or foolish, enough to open the door and step into the light. The rooms behind us were quiet, but not empty. They were filled with the soft weight of memory, with music and laughter, with stories still being written. And as the day rolled forward, the world outside wide and bright, I understood there would always be doors, some that creaked, some that sang, some that would never open again. But for the first time, I knew I could live with that. Winter crept up on us, slow and patient, draping the town in gray and frost. But it didn't feel ominous anymore. The house held its warmth easily, as if each night spent by the fire, each shared meal, stitched some new layer of safety into the walls. Snow gathered on the windowsills and the porch roof, softening every edge. The garden withered and slept, wildflowers pressed flat beneath a blanket of white. We learned to cherish the hush, how even the longest silences were different now. No more prickling dread, no more feeling watched. Just quiet and the slow, honest pulse of living. Cal and I filled the days with small rituals. We brought out the old board games, the ones left dusty in closets since childhood, and let competition burn away whatever shadows were left. Sometimes we invited neighbors to join, sometimes we played alone, the laughter echoing, as if inviting the house to join in. At night, we made cocoa and read books by the fire. The walls listened, yes, but only as all old houses do, curious about the living, content to witness. Christmas came and went. The tree, lopsided and bold, stood by the window, hung with the strangest assortment of ornaments, some ancient, some new, a few shaped by the children Cal taught, each one a bright, silly charm against the memory of old fears. The town's carolers came to the porch, their songs muffled by snow, and for the first time I didn't brace myself for voices from somewhere else. Their music was only music, untroubled by anything hiding in the dark. The past, for all its weight, stayed where it belonged, Of course, there were nights when the wind howled just right and the rafters settled a little too loudly, and I would wake, heart thumping, mind racing through old corridors and locked rooms. But the house always soothed itself again, the cold fading, the silence settling. Each morning, the world was the same calm, bright, ordinary. Cal thrived in this world. His students filled the parlor with song and chatter, and he grew more himself every day, his laughter deep and honest. I found work at the library, shelving books and answering questions. My life woven into the gentle rhythms of the town. Sometimes, sitting at the desk, I'd find myself thinking about the house, the doors, the darkness, the faces we'd left behind, and feel not fear, but gratitude. We survived, we returned. We were allowed to write something new. We repaired the attic together in early February, patching leaks, sweeping away cobwebs. It was nothing special, just work the kind families everywhere do when winter is long and money is short. The space was empty, but for boxes of old clothes, dusty trunks, and the mothball scent of time. There were no more doors within doors, no more cold spots or hidden threats. Just sunlight trickling in through a small window, making even the dust seem golden. We found the last of Mom's letters in a trunk. Birthday cards never given, a grocery list. A note about a forgotten recipe. We read them aloud, the words soft and plain, and the ache they left behind was sweet, not sharp. The attic was hers, and now it was ours, and no one else would ever lay claim to it again. Some nights, Cal dreamed of Sarah. I did too, though less often. In his dreams, she danced through empty rooms, trailing laughter. Her face always turned away. He'd wake, sad but smiling, and say, "She's okay, you know. She never got lost." And I would believe him, because we had learned to trust dreams that didn't end in fear. As the days grew longer and the snow melted from the roof, I felt something inside me shift. The urge to look back faded. I no longer counted the days since the last nightmare, no longer tracked the creaks in the floor, or tested the locks before bed. The house didn't need guarding. Neither did I. We had each found our footing on this side of darkness. One Sunday afternoon, as the sun poured through every window, Cal and I carried our old chairs onto the porch. We drank coffee, listened to the drip of melting icicles, watched the mailman waving as he walked past. The world was full of simple joys, and every one of them felt like a small victory. We talked about spring, about plans for the garden, maybe raising chickens. We made lists and scratched them out and laughed, certain that no curse in any house, anywhere could ever take this from us again. Looking back at the house, I felt nothing but affection, like for a difficult friend who'd finally told you the truth. It had no secrets left. Every door, every hidden stair, every old hurt had been aired and healed. Its story belonged to us now, and we could do with it as we pleased. In the golden hush of the afternoon, I understood that this was the real end, not just of horror, but of mystery. The house was ours. The future was ours. The story, whatever came next, was unfinished, but it would never again begin with fear. The last days of winter slipped away quietly, and spring arrived without fanfare, no omens, no knocking, just the simple certainty of green shoots pushing through thawed earth. Life unfolded in the slow, ordinary way that had once seemed impossible to us. Cal planted a garden, turning soil in the side yard, while I watched from the kitchen window, coffee warming my hands, content just to see him smile at the stubborn work of living. Birds returned in flocks, filling the trees with calls that sounded like laughter. Even the wind, once so full of warning, now only played with the wind chimes by the porch, teasing out bright, gentle songs. Inside the house felt honest and empty in all the best ways. No shadows moving in the corners, no whispers drifting down the hall, no chill seeping from under the attic door. I spent hours cleaning rooms I'd once been afraid to enter, scrubbing floors, airing out closets, finding only dust and the ordinary mess of lives interrupted. The scars on the wallpaper, the gouges in the baseboards, signs of all we'd survived, felt like trophies now, marks of endurance rather than threat. Cal hung new curtains, and I bought yellow paint for the back hallway, letting color erase old stains. We talked about repainting the front door. No more red, we decided. We chose blue, the color of clear sky. One morning, as rain battered the roof and turned the yard to mud, I found Cal standing by the window in the living room, looking out at the storm. He was humming, absent-minded, some nameless tune he must have learned from the children at the music school. I stood beside him, our reflections clear in the glass, and for the first time, I realized how young we still were. Survival had aged us, but it hadn't finished us. We were both, somehow, whole. We talked less about the house as the days went on. The nightmares faded, replaced by dreams of gardens, of sunlight, of Sarah's laughter echoing through open windows. We let ourselves imagine a future not bound to this place, but we never discussed leaving. The house wasn't a prison anymore. It was a home we had earned. And every morning we woke up in it was a small kind of miracle. One afternoon, a group of children from the neighborhood came running up the drive, chasing each other through puddles. Their laughter so loud and careless it made me laugh too. They begged for stories. Not ghost stories, not the truth, just tales of adventure and secret tunnels and treasure maps. I obliged, making up nonsense about pirates and buried gold, about hidden rooms that held nothing more sinister than forgotten birthday cakes. The children listened wide-eyed, but when they looked up at the house, there was no fear in their faces, only wonder. Cal and I hosted friends for dinner. We filled the table with food and the rooms with laughter, the kind of laughter that shakes dust from rafters and leaves a house shining. In those moments, I realized the final transformation was complete. The house had become ordinary, alive with joy, not dread. Even after everyone left, the warmth lingered, a memory that didn't hurt. Sometimes, late at night, I'd walk through the halls alone just to listen. Not for knocks or voices, but for the small, everyday sounds. The sigh of settling wood, the distant tick of the kitchen clock, Cal's breath from behind a bedroom door. I stood in the center of the house and whispered thank you, not to the ghosts, not to the past, but to the walls themselves, for holding us, for letting us go. The old doors stayed shut, and for the first time, I didn't need to check them. I trusted they would stay that way. When spring broke fully, and the world went wild with green, we painted the front door blue. It shone in the sun, bright and hopeful, and we took a picture. Two brothers, smiling, the house rising behind us, windows open wide to the light. We sent the picture to everyone we loved, proof that we'd made it through, proof that some stories really do have an end. We were free. The house was free, and every day, every hour was new. The story of the house of us didn't truly end, of course, not in the way stories in books or whispered legends do. Life rolled on, ordinary and beautiful, marked only by the rituals we invented for ourselves. The garden grew thick and tangled, a small jungle that Cal tended with gentle hands. I found myself out there too, kneeling in the dirt, feeling the world's patience move through the soil into my bones. We invited the neighbors for summer barbecues, our laughter rising louder than the cicadas, and sometimes caught ourselves glancing back at the windows, half, expecting to see some flicker of our old shadows. But there was nothing there, only the bright reflection of our own faces, smiling unafraid. On rainy nights we played cards by the fire, trading stories not of the house, but of the future trips we might take, friends we might make, all the years ahead of us that no longer felt stolen or cursed. When the moon rose high and the world outside grew silver and silent, the house settled into its old bones with a kind of satisfaction, as if grateful for its place in the world, content to be nothing more than shelter. There were still moments when memory tugged at us, small, sharp flashes of old pain or fear, but they passed quickly, outnumbered by the simple joys that filled our days. Even the scars left on us, the way we sometimes startled at sudden noises or hesitated at open doors, became softer over time, worn down by kindness, by sunlight, by the relentless persistence of hope. We learned to trust the quiet, to let it comfort us instead of warning us. We learned that the past could live alongside the present without poisoning it. As the years turned, the house faded from the stories told in town. Children grew up. New families moved in down the road, and the rumors about the haunted place became only a footnote, a curiosity. People saw the blue door and the garden out front, the laughter echoing from the porch, and understood whatever darkness had once lived here, it was gone for good. We grew older, and the house grew old with us, each year marking us both with a little more wear, a little more warmth. In autumn, when the leaves burned gold and the wind sharpened, I sometimes stood in the doorway, watching the sky, and thought about all the doors I'd once been afraid to open, how easy it would be to never look back, how grateful I was now that I had. There is no great secret to surviving a haunted house, no trick for living with memory and grief. There is only this: you go on. You fill the rooms with laughter, with work, with kindness, until the shadows have nowhere left to settle. You keep the doors open, not for what waits in the dark, but for what light you can let in. You live, and eventually, you realize the house isn't haunted anymore. It's just home. There is a hush in a house that has survived its own darkness, a deep, living quiet that isn't the silence of dread but the breathing space of peace. In that hush, every footstep, every laugh, every echo of daily life becomes a kind of benediction, a gentle, ongoing reminder that we made it through. It didn't happen all at once. It never does. The first days after the doors stayed shut, we moved like people relearning their own bodies. The mornings were almost too bright, the softness of the rooms too tender on our eyes, as if the sunlight itself might vanish if we reached too quickly. But the sun kept coming. And the house, like a patient old dog, seemed to settle beside us, eager for this new season of calm. I took to rising early, making coffee before dawn, and sitting on the back steps with a blanket over my shoulders. Sometimes Cal joined me, sometimes not. In the stillness, before the word woke up, the only sounds were the songbirds and the faint tick of the kitchen clock through the open window. I breathed in the scent of dew on grass, the metallic sharpness of earth, and watched the sky turn gold and pink. The quiet pressed into my skin, worked its way into my bones, and little by little, I learned to trust it. Each day began without omen. There were no knocks, no cold drafts, no sense that anything waited on the other side of the walls. We built new routines with a kind of reverence, honoring the mundane as if every chore were a blessing. I fixed what I could around the house, oiling hinges, tightening the banisters, patching,